Am I bought into the romance by the end of this book? Yes, of course. Is Kingfisher literally vile and disgusting in most of the scenes he's in? Yeah, also true. He's got like evil metal poisoning in his blood. Totally get that. But like, still, some of these things are like the reddest of red flags. And yet, we persist. Today, we're going to be talking about every single thing that happened in the book Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This book was, I think, a surprise that kind of like swept the romantasy world last year. To me, it like kind of came out of nowhere. I was minding my own business, and then my sister was texting me, have you read Quicksilver? And I said, what the heckaroo is that? And then everyone and their mother was reading it. And then I was reading it, obviously. And the sequel is coming out on Tuesday. And so obviously we needed to have a little recap to refresh our brains on what happened. Because I don't know about you, but I don't remember anything except that there were vampires. And I didn't realize that there were going to be vampires. And when they showed up, I said, oh my God, vampires. Also, it relies heavily on blacksmithing. But don't even worry. We're going to talk about every little thing that happens in the book. So you're going to be all ready to read and enjoy Brimstone. Okay, let's jump into it. Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This is Ceres. She is our main girly. She is who we pick up with from the jump. She, as we will come to learn, lives in essentially like the slums of Zilvarin, which is like this desert country. We first meet Ceres, and she is up to no good, obviously. We meet her and she's stealing stuff, which I actually feel like is how a ton of these books start. The beginning of this book reminded me so distinctly of Fearless by Lauren Roberts. I was like, these are the same book, because they both open with our girlies like stealing something that is a bad idea to steal. The book opens with Ceres talking to this guardian. It's not like a casual conversation. The guardian does have his hand around Ceres' throat. We don't know exactly what has happened before this, but we know that Ceres is from the Third Ward, which is like kind of like the slums of the city, and she is in the hub, which is like the wealthy part of town. She is not allowed to be there as this like lower tier citizen. And so the guardian is like yelling at her, trying to get her to leave. He has his hand around her throat, and she does not want to go to the dungeons. The guardian is like, I'm going to send you there. And he's like, they're going to be particularly miserable. It's summertime. We'll learn that Zilvarin is a summer place, and this planet, again, I'm a little confused on the specifics of like planets versus realms in this world, but there is two suns, and so one sun is always up. It is the heat of the summer right now, though, so it is like particularly hot, particularly stifling, and the dungeons are one of the just like most miserable places to be in town. She knows she doesn't want to go there. And so she decides she has a little scheme. There's a cute little one. And she starts like coughing and crying and sobbing. And she's like, you can't send me back to the Third Ward. My whole family is sick with the rattles. If you send me back, I will die. And of course, the guardian is like, okay, well, if your whole family's sick with the rattles, probably means you are as well. The rattles being this like coughing illness that seems to like kill people. And so he backs up, and then he goes and he draws his sword. That gives Ceres enough distance where she's not like immediately in harm's way. And also he takes a moment. He doesn't immediately stab her, because he realizes that like since they're in this like capital city, they're in the nice part of town, if he kills her, then he's going to have to figure out how to dispose of her body. And that's like really something he's not like super interested in doing. That doesn't sound like a fun way to spend his day. And he takes off his gauntlet and glove I don't remember exactly why he's doing this, but he takes it off, and Ceres spots this and is like, I see an opportunity. That gauntlet is made out of gold. He has this like, that's like the thing that protects your forearm when you're in a suit of armor. And she recognizes that like that would be something that she could like sell for like a lot of money. It would be worth like a lot of money on the black market. And she's like, what a great opportunity for me. And so she snatches it, and then she starts to run off. The guardian is chasing her, because obviously it would be bad news if like a piece of his armor went missing. He's going to get in trouble with everyone. Also, he like needs to deal with this criminal who's running about. The guardians are like very well trained, but they're wearing like big gold suits of armor. I know this guy's just in like a mall cop outfit, but like, trust me, they are. And so he's like slowed down because he's wearing so much metal on his body, which sounds like super uncomfortable if it's a gajillion degrees outside. That sounds bad, but whatever. Bummer for them. So she starts running, and she gets to this like wall, and she starts climbing the wall. She like runs at it so hard she feels like she's gonna be bruised tomorrow. She did not slow down before she hit the wall. She just like jumps onto it. She like puts the gauntlet on over her arm, but it like has lowered her dexterity so much that it prevents her from climbing the wall quite quickly. She knows that she should just drop it. Like, now she is like putting an even bigger target on herself, and she's slowing herself down. It would be like the smarter move to just drop it, but she like is like, it would be worth so much money that like I just can't leave it behind. And so she keeps climbing even as the guardian gets closer and closer, and she's like risking herself more and more. And the guardian is on the ground like below her. He like can't climb the wall in all that armor, and he's yelling at her like, you're gonna wind up dying. This wall is like massive. It's like, also no one is gonna be willing to take a guardian's gauntlet. Like that is gonna be too difficult for you to like sell. So just like drop it. Like you're not gonna be able to get away with anything there. He's like, drop the gauntlet and I'll let you go. And then she's like up at the top of the wall. And she's like walking around, and we see Ceres doing this thing, which becomes like a very important, it's like the whole point of the book. But initially we're like, okay, girl, not the time. She's up on the top of the wall, and she sees this quartz, and it starts vibrating and like coming alive and kind of like moving. And then it like starts talking to her. It starts saying, she sees us, she feels us. And she's like, hey, not right now. I'm literally busy. I cannot talk to you rocks right now. She takes her hand, she slams it on top of the wall, and all the quartz like stops vibrating. Just like keep that in your mind. We'll need to know that later. But she finishes the climb. She like continues up. I think she was on a ledge when she talked to the quartz. She continues up. She drops down to another ledge on the other side of the wall. The guardian can't see her anymore, but he's still shouting. He makes promises that he will find her and he will make her an enemy for life. He's like, I'm going to track you down. You're going to be in trouble. You and me, not friends anymore. She heads back into her neighborhood, and she brings her gauntlet to Elroy. And Elroy is immediately like, no. Like, why did you bring that here? You cannot melt that down in my furnace. Like, this is too dangerous. Like, even having you here with that gauntlet under my roof is like something super risky. Like, I don't know why you would do this, you dumb dummy. And Ceres is like, well, I like don't know what else to do. She's like, I can't just like carry this around with me all the time. And if you won't let me melt it down, I like don't know what to do. She can't like bring it home with her. Her and her brother Hayden have been sleeping above a tavern in this like little attic space for a few weeks now, but it's just a matter of time that they get like found out that they're sleeping there. And so she can't like leave it there. It's not really like a safe place for her to leave this like very expensive piece of metal. And now she's kind of feeling stupid for taking the gauntlet, because she's like, okay, well, if Elroy won't let me melt it down, then that really was like just kind of like a waste of time, money, and energy. Not money. I don't think she spent any money, but energy and safety. And Elroy's like, why did you take it in the first place? People are going to be looking for it, and they will skin you alive when they find it. If they find out it was under my roof, they will cut my hands off. And we learned that like he is a glassmaker, and so his hands are obviously incredibly important to what he does. Like if he does not have hands, he can't do his craft, and he will die because he doesn't have enough money to like not have a job. And so this would be like a death sentence for him, even if they like find out that she has it here. And obviously if they find out she's the one who took it, they'll execute her immediately. And we learn a little bit more about their situation here in the 3rd district. We learn that fresh food is near impossible to come by. Most of the residents are starving. And we also learned they're on a water ration. They're only given, I think at some point we're given the specific ounce number. I think it's like 6 ounces of water a day, which is like less than 1 glass. And I like actually think you would die like so fast in the desert if that's how much water you had access to. Like I think in like 2 weeks. Like I think it is, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you could last longer. That's not even a cup. That's like so little water. I would perish quickly. And Elroy's like, you know what? Take the gauntlet back. And Ceres is like, no, I'm not going to do that. I like nearly broke my neck going and getting it. And Elroy is just like, climb back over the wall tonight. Take the gauntlet, chuck it over the wall. The guardian who lost it will find it. Like one of them will, like one of the other guardians will take it back to the hub. It'll get returned to the right person. It'll be not your problem anymore. And Ceres is like, I can't do that. Like Hayden and I can't go on like this. We are barely scraping by. We like need something to grant us like a little bit more safety, security, and stability. And Elroy is like, okay, well right now you are choosing to like be executed on the streets. Like this is not going to grant you any more safety. This is just going to grant you a public execution. Do you want to be executed in front of your brother? Is that what you're looking for? And seriously, yeah, that is what I want. I want to die and ruin Hayden's life, your life. I want to be made a spectacle of. I want everyone to know me as the glassmaker's apprentice who was stupid enough to steal from Madra's guard and got herself killed for it. That's exactly what I want, Elroy. Ceres normally doesn't speak to Elroy like that. Elroy is like really, we'll come to learn that her and Hayden, her brother, don't really have family. And Elroy is like the closest thing they have as like the person who is like her mentor in her craft. and she's normally like quite respectful of Elroy, but in this moment she's not. She's just like so exhausted by the fact that they're scraping by like so barely. She just like can't endure it anymore. And Elroy is like, what if they track you down and realize what you can do, the way you can affect metal? And Ceres is like, it's just a parlor trick, Elroy. Like, that's not something exciting. It doesn't mean anything. And he's like, okay, well then just like think about your brother and like the harm that this could cause him if you're not careful. And Ceres is like, he's 20. He has to face reality at some point. And I am doing this for him. Everything I do is for him. And you know what? I do think Hayden, as a 20-year-old man in this society, particularly, a 20-year-old man who has been coddled because he lives in like the suburbs and went to like a private high school, you know, like a different level of maturity I would expect from him than like someone who grows up in like just a dystopian like sort of hellscape. Like, yeah, at this point you are still letting your sister baby you. That's kind of embarrassing, my friends. Here is Hayden. Speak of the devil. Ceres finds her brother, and he is at the House of Kala, which is like a gambling den and a pub where you can trade goods directly for food and drinks, because like everyone here is like so poor that like we're back in the barter system. Hayden is really good at cheating at cards because that's one of the only way that they could get extra food and drink, so she's not like surprised to find him there. Ceres has brought the gauntlet with her, but she's put it in a little baggie. She has it in a little tote bag over her shoulder. And she finds her brother, and he is not looking great. He's gotten beaten up again by Carrion. And Ceres is pissed because she had given him money to buy water, not to go gamble it. And he went and gambled with Carrion. And we'll learn more about Carrion in a minute here. But Carrion is kind of like no good. Like, what a mistake. Not just gambling off of anyone, but off of Carrion Swift. And so Ceres tries to head to the back of the bar to go talk to Carrion about what happened with her brother. But Bryn, the bartender, stops her. And Bryn is like, don't. Like, Hayden should know better. He knows that Carrion cheats, and I don't want a brawl. Hayden tries to come in, and Bryn is like, no. He's on a 24-hour ban. I'll bring him a beer on the steps, like, if you have the money for it. But, like, he's not allowed in here. She does not buy him a drink, even though Bryn is like, you could buy him a drink. She's like, I just got here and he's being stupid. Why would I buy him a drink? And Bryn is like, okay, better hold your breath then. Hayden, in his gambling, not only lost all the money that Ceres had sent him with to go get water, but also lost his little face scarf. And because they live in the desert, it's so dusty out there, you need these face scarves to like prevent you from inhaling like a ton of dirt and debris when you walk around town. And so Hayden really like feels like he can't go home either because he doesn't have his face scarf to prevent him from like inhaling a bunch of stuff. Perfect. And so Ceres is like, okay, I will go deal with it, Hayden. You go sit on the front steps. Don't move. Don't do anything stupid while I'm inside, okay? And Bryn is like, okay, but no fighting. And Ceres is like, I won't. And then Ceres is like, I'm going to give you this bag, and I need you to just hold on to it. Don't look inside of it. Don't do anything stupid, okay? Hayden, you hold this bag. I'm going to go talk to Carrion for a minute. Can you listen to me? He cannot. Ceres goes back to talk to Carrion. He's at the back table. We learn that Carrion and Ceres have like slept together like a few times. They're not currently an item, but like Carrion is a flirty guy. And so he just likes flirting. And Ceres says to Carrion, you promised you wouldn't gamble with Hayden again. And Carrion says, that doesn't sound like me. I don't think that's something I would have promised. And Ceres says, you didn't keep your word. Also, you beat the crap out of him. Like double trouble. Come on, dude. And Carrion is like, what is a light beating between friends? A friendly beating. He needed a reminder. And Ceres is like, he's my brother. Messing with him is against the rules. And Carrion said, I never met a rule I didn't want to break, sunshine. And Ceres is like, okay, we had a deal that you wouldn't mess with me or Hayden, and I wouldn't mess with your supply lines. And Carrion continues to be like, well, maybe I just like wanted an excuse to see you. Maybe that's why I messed with him a little bit. And then he explains that he had to break a couple ribs of Hayden's because Hayden had tried to stab him. Hayden had tried to stab Carrion, and Carrion is like, I just can't let people be trying to stab me and then just letting them walk away. Like, that doesn't look good. That's not smart, you know? And Carrion's like, if you sit with me and have a drink, I will give you back Hayden's little mask. And the vibes are like very flirty, bantery, cutie patootie between Carrion and Ceres. And in the end, Ceres agrees to one drink that she will sit with, and she'll sit with him for 15 minutes, and then he'll give her Hayden's scarf back. And also like the chits, which I think are the coins. I'm not sure. Carrion gets her a massive glass of whiskey, and then he asks her about a rumor he'd heard about a raven-haired girl stealing a gauntlet from a guardian. Obviously, she's the girl in question. Ceres has, like, long black hair. And Ceres is like, oh my god, that's crazy that someone would steal a gauntlet from a guardian. Like, who the heck would be dumb enough to do that? And Carrie's like, yeah, what's even crazier is if she brought it back here and has it hidden somewhere in the third. And then he's like, Saris, I need you to be so careful with this. I don't think you understand how like dangerous that is. He's like, I will move the item. I will take that gauntlet and I will hide it in my warehouse for you if you need me to. He has a warehouse just outside the district because he controls like the black market trade routes that go through the third district. And Saris is like, I'm not stupid. I wouldn't give it to you, you dummy. And Carrie's like, I don't want it, you freaking idiot. I just want it out of the third. Like, our people suffer enough without guardians tearing through the neighborhoods looking for this gauntlet and killing anyone who gets in their way. Like, I just want to keep everyone chill and safe. I don't want the vibes to get terrible here. And Saris thinks to herself, there was something very galling about being lectured by the likes of Carrion. He was one of the most selfish, most arrogant men alive. He loved for the world to believe that he didn't care about anyone or anything, but it seemed that he did care, and I had done something so selfish that he couldn't stand by and watch it happen. Gods. Saris is like, okay, this is making me feel even worse about my choices. And Saris is like, don't worry, Carrion, I'm going to fix it before anything gets out of hand. Don't you even worry. Saris leaves the bar, goes outside to look for her brother. He's not on the front steps where she told him to be. She doesn't seem shocked by this, and she's just hoped that he hasn't gone and done anything stupid with the gauntlet. And so she starts jogging through the city looking for him. She's thinking about like some of the shops and like as she like passes them, thinking if any of them will be willing to like take the gauntlet from her and like not rat her out. And then she's a little worried that Hayden might have tried to do this ahead of her and he wouldn't have thought things through because he's a dummy. And then Saris hears screaming that is coming from the Mirage at this, like the center of the neighborhood, which means the Guardians are executing someone. They are spilling blood. And so she starts running even faster. And pretty soon Guardians are chasing after her because they're like, girl, why are you running through the city? And so it's just her and a little gang of Guardians running. They're chasing after her, yelling at her to stop, but she knows she needs to get to the Mirage and make sure her brother isn't in trouble. Lo and behold, she makes it to the Mirage, and who does she find but her brother, surrounded by Guardians. He's in the middle of it all. He's holding the gauntlet. Saris is feeling like very guilty about it all, and the Guardians are like shouting at him to give the gauntlet back or they're going to kill him. And Saris knows she needs to rescue him because he's like inept and can't rescue himself, but she's like really not sure how. There's like so many Guardians and they're like in the middle of town. Like, what is she supposed to do? And then Hayden sees his sister and he's like, Saris, I'm so sorry. And Saris is like, stop. And she's trying to negotiate with the Guardians directly. And the captain of the Guardians says, this doesn't concern you, girl. Get back inside and let us do our work. And Saris says, it does concern me. I asked him to hold my bag. That piece of armor he is holding is mine. And the captain says, it is not yours. Only a member of the guard may own that armor. Wearing it is an honor that is earned and not by the likes of you. And Saris is like, okay, semantics. I was the one who stole it. So I think I'm the one you want, you know? And Hayden's like, no, I took it. She's lying. And he's like, Saris is like, look at him. Do you think that guy could have stolen a gauntlet? He's not that bright. And the captain's like, okay, I really don't care who stole it. In fact, I will arrest both of you. Oh my gosh, how fun. You can both go to jail. And Saris obviously is like, wait, no, that's not what I want. And she pulls out a knife and then she starts cutting up Guardians. And the captain goes, we got a feisty one, boys. And then she's fighting off a bunch of the Guardians. She's rolling around, stabbing people. She ends up killing 2 of the Queen's guards and she maims another. And then Hayden is like, just run, Saris. And then the captain says, all 4 winds combined couldn't carry her far enough for my reach now, boy. She just killed 2 of the Queen's guards and maimed another. Her death warrant is already signed. And Hayden is trying to block the Guardians from reaching his sister, but they kind of don't care about Hayden anymore. They're like, we got to deal with this murderer. Not you, who maybe stole that glove, but we kind of don't think so. So she becomes the priority. They like let Hayden go. I don't know why they don't arrest both of them. Maybe they don't have enough people. They're like worried she's going to murder more of them. They grab Saris. They let Hayden go and they start carrying her away. And as Saris is being carried away, she says to Hayden, it'll be okay, Hayden. Go and see the old man. He'll let you stay with him now. Go on. I'll be back by dinner. I promise. She knows this is a lie. Like, she wasn't born yesterday. Everyone knows this is a lie. Hayden is like, I'm not leaving you. And Saris is like, could you literally just listen to me one time? Like, you gotta leave. You want to come to jail with me? That's not going to be very helpful. Go talk to Elroy. And so she says, I don't need your help. I don't want you following after me, blubbering like a little brat who needs his hand held all the time. And Hayden's like, okay, rude. I didn't realize I was such a burden. And Sarah says, well, you are. Don't follow. Don't come looking for me. She's like saying all these mean things. So like to keep him safe, obviously. We weren't born yesterday. And then Ceres is brought up to the palace. Growing up, she like really had always like dreamed of finding a way to get into the palace. Like it was her dream to see inside. Obviously, this is not the way she expected to do it. She obviously didn't want to be arrested and brought to the queen for execution. She's immediately tossed into a cell in the basement and left down there for hours until finally the captain comes for her. And the captain is like, hey, where did you learn to fight like that? Because, like, the Guardians are extremely well-trained, so for her to kill 2 of them with only, like, a dagger and then, like, maim a 3rd seems, like, kind of crazy. And Ceres is like, could we just hurry up and get on with it? And the captain, like, tries to get more out of her, but she's, like, really unwilling to talk. The captain is taking her to meet the queen, which is, like, a big deal. But because now her crime is murdering guards, the queen wants to see her. And clearly the plan is to, like, get her executed ASAP. The captain hauls her through the palace. Ceres is dragging her feet because she doesn't particularly want to rush to her own execution. And then he gives her, like, a big drink of water, which is, like, a really big deal to Ceres because, like I mentioned, in the 3rd district, they have severe water restrictions. In the palace, they have, like, water really regularly. They have, like, taps. Like tap water. They have plumbing. As they're walking around, she says this to the captain. You people walk around with those plague bags hooked on your belts. You say our wards locked down so tight because we're quarantined. You say we're afflicted with a sickness, that we're contagious. But we aren't, Captain. We're being slowly and methodically poisoned because we don't matter. Because we ask questions. Because we say no. Because Madra sees us as a burden on the city. She feeds us foul, dirty water, and we die in droves because of it. Meanwhile, you and yours turn the handle and fresh, clean water flows into your canisters. No one's standing over you, looking over your shoulder, beating you and telling you enough. Have you ever asked yourself why? I'm not paid to ask anything, Heron interrupted. Heron is the captain's name. I've called him captain, but his name is Heron. Interrupted in a clipped tone. No, of course not. Like I said, ask a question and you'll get sent to the 3rd. It isn't a disease that's contagious in my ward, Captain. It's dissent. Anarchy and rebellion spread like wildfire. And what do you do with a fire? You blockade it, trap it behind a wall, give it nowhere else to go until it burns itself out and dies a quiet death. That's what Madra's doing now with my people, except our fire hasn't burnt out the way she hoped it would. We've been reduced to embers, yes, but the coals that lie beneath the ash of my ward are still hot enough to burn. Do you know much about metalwork, Captain? I do. It's under the most unbearable conditions that the sharpest, most dangerous weapons are forged. We are dangerous, Captain. She's turned us all into weapons. That's why she won't suffer my people to live. Okay. She gives her little speech. It's very Katniss Everdeen. Fire is catching. But essentially, the 3rd district, the rationale that they give for why the 3rd district is like cordoned off is because they have this plague and so they can't travel because of this like plague. But it's actually not true. It is, they're like trying to just like keep this group, the poverty like contained and like kill them off because then they won't be a problem anymore. They walk through the palace. The walking is taking forever. They finally get to this big locked door and Ceres is like very eager to see what is behind it. Especially because it's inside the palace. Like, what would need to be locked up so tightly already in this palace that is so heavily guarded? And they go inside, and it's this huge vaulted room, and at the center is this raised platform with, like, a weird little lever in the middle. And she's like, what the heck is that? So weird. But Ceres feels this immediately, like, drawn to the platform. And she, like, starts moving towards it until Heron, the captain, like, pulls her back and is like, I wouldn't go over there if I were you. And Ceres is like, what is this place? And Heron says, it used to be the Hall of Mirrors a long time ago. And then she's like, again, walking towards the thing. And he says, stand still. And don't think about trying to escape. This place is packed full of guards. You won't get 5 feet from that door. And then the captain starts lighting torches around the room, kind of like leaving her in the corner. And she starts to see that around the room, there are like gods and goddesses like carved into the walls. The Zilvaran people don't practice religion anymore, but like there is this sense that there was an old religion that they've kind of like lost and forgotten. Then the queenie walks into the room and she is like absolutely gorgeous, Queen Madra. And the queen says to her, rumors are a wicked thing. I am not fond of rumors, Ceres Fane. Rumors are the next door neighbors to gossip, and gossip always breaks bread with lies. It's just the way these things go. I apologize for the shackles, but I'm not overly fond of low-born rats from the 3rd either. You never know where their hands have been. In the very least, they're always so dirty, and it's hard to get stains out of satin. And then the queen is like, I heard you stole armor from one of my guards and then killed 2 of them. First of all, like, how did you do that? Again, who trained you? They're just, like, surprised at the level of skilled violence that she was able to possess. And I think it is particularly frightening because they are trying to like make sure to quell any rebellions that might happen in the 3rd, because they are trying to like exterminate this group of people. So it's a problem if they start fighting back. And Sarah says, I taught and trained by myself. No one trained me. And the queen is like, okay, that doesn't literally make any sense. You were so good. And my guardians are incredibly seasoned fighters and are second to none in the realm. So I want to know who taught you. And Sarah says like, I already told you it was me. I'm a self-taught genius. And the queen does like slap her in the face because she's being so annoying. And the queen is like, I need answers and you're not giving them to me. So punch in the face. And the queen says, was it the Fae? They've always found a way through. And Sarah says like, what are you talking about? Like, WTF? I don't know what you mean. She's like, obviously Sarah has heard stories about the Fae, but like, they're like stories. She was like, girl, are you crazy? No, fairies didn't teach me how to fight people. And the queen is like, the Fae were warmongers, cannibals, beastly creatures with no temperance, sense of morality, nor any notion of mercy. The eldest immortals visited their wrath upon the land with an iron fist, leaving a path of chaos and destruction in their wake. The 7 cities rejoiced when I cast them out, and now they have sent you to try and kill me? And Sarah is like, no. Like, I pinky promise? Like, no, they haven't. I don't know them. The queen says, they want this land, I assume. Tell me, what will they do if I don't return arid, worthless, bare sand dunes to them? And Sarah says, like, I literally do not know what you're talking about, girlfriend. And the queen is like, stop lying and just answer the question. The Fae wish to come to these lands and take them from me. What do you think they will have to do in order to seize my throne from me? And Sarah says, like, kill you? And the queen's like, how do they plan to do that? And Sarah says, like, I, again, don't know. I haven't spoken to them. I don't know what you're talking about. And the queen is like, they probably haven't really thought about how to kill an immortal such as myself. I will say that the ruckus you caused today was a little exciting. TBH, I've been a little bored recently. Being in power over this whole city has just been kind of like, well, nothing really exciting happening. There's been no real threat to the throne of late, and it's kind of got me bored. So this has been exciting. That's actually why I brought you here. I had to see for myself if this place remained untouched. I knew nothing would have changed, but I have a nasty habit of letting paranoia get the best of me. And she's like, okay, so I did have to just check on this. And then the queen's like, it does look safe and sound. Nothing has changed. Maybe the Fae haven't come back. And then she turns to Heron and says, deal with her. When you are done, head back to where you found her and root out the rest of her people. And Sarah says like, no. My brother, I told you, like, had nothing to do with the gauntlet. Like, he is innocent in all this. The queen, like, literally doesn't care. The queen is like, you and everyone in your district are rats, and we will kill as many of you as we like. We want to make sure that rebellion doesn't fester. And so she says, so I'm going to kill you and then burn your family and then tear the third ward to the ground. For the next 100 years, anyone foolish to think twice about stealing from you will remember the day Saris Fane offended the Zalvaran crown and 100,000 people paid the price. Okay, real worst case scenario she didn't really think about when she stole the gauntlet is that the queen would get so mad that she would murder everyone in her neighborhood. You know, and who would think that would be the consequence? But, like, sometimes actions have unintended consequences. Like the queen getting so mad she murders everyone you've ever met. The queen then leaves and tells the captain to make her sing. And he grabs his sword and he's ready to torture her for a minute before killing her. And then Saris is like, you know, I kind of thought we, like, kind of made a connection on our way up here. Like, we were kind of developing a little bit of a friendship. Is this nothing to you? Like, killing an innocent human life? And the captain's like, TBH, you aren't innocent. You're a thief. Also, you murdered a couple people. And Saris is like, he actually doesn't bring up the murder, which I do feel like is the larger crime. Instead, he just brings up the thievery. And Saris is like, well, in order to survive in the third, you have to be a thief. You'd do the same if it meant the difference between life and death. She's like, have you ever seen Les Mis? You know, the hero of that story is the guy who stole some bread. And the captain's like, I don't appreciate your judgment on my moral compass. Death is an open doorway that's meant to be walked through. On the other side of it lies peace. Count yourself lucky you get to make the journey at all. For what it's worth, I am sorry. And then he does stab her in the stomach and twists the sword around so she is, like, screaming. And Heron is like, so sorry. I know it hurts, but I do have to make you scream so the queen is happy, and I don't want to, like, make her mad. So I'm going to have to stab you a couple times just to kind of get the screams going, and then I'll off you. It'll be fine. He does stab her again with a dagger, which is a bad time for Saris. And then the captain's like, okay, one more good scream, and then we can be done. We'll have you on your way. And he starts to, like, struggle to stab her again. And he goes like, how are you doing this? How is this even possible? Like, he seems like he's unable to, like, bring his dagger down to, like, actually stab her. Meanwhile, Saris is using an invisible hand made of her will to hold the dagger back. So, like, Saris definitely has some magic. going on. And Heron says, heretical magic, where did you learn how to? No, just let me end this. You're bleeding out anyway. You're already dead. And Ceres turns to the captain and starts to head for him as he's like begging for her life. She has the like sword held on in her stomach. She like knows she can't remove the sword from her stomach because if she does, she'll bleed out. So she's walking around, sword sticking out of her stomach. The captain goes, monster, you'll end the world like this. Please don't let it take me. Please. She's like a little confused because it doesn't totally sound like he's talking to her, because like, don't let it take me. Like, what the heck is she talking about? And she's trying to figure out what she's to do when she notices that there's another sword sticking out of that. Like, the thing she thought was a lever is actually a sword sticking out from this like raised platform. And she doesn't want to remove the sword from her stomach again because she'll bleed out. And so she's like, I'm gonna just go grab that other sword that they have in the room. And the captain says, no, don't touch the sword. Do not turn the key. And she does, obviously. She like pulls herself up onto the raised platform. She knows she's not doing well. She knows she's going to pass out from blood loss soon. But she's like, I got to make it to the sword so I can stab this guy. And Heron starts shouting to her, Ceres, no, do not touch the sword. Do not turn the key. Do not open the gate. You have no idea the hell you will unleash on this place. And then as she like reaches for the sword on the platform, the sword does fall out of her stomach, which is like not great. You know, that's not great news, but also like it's hard to keep a sword in your stomach when you're like about to pass out. Swords are kind of heavy and they don't want to stay in your stomach. They want to leave. And so Ceres grabs the sword that is in this platform and she pulls it from the platform, turning on the captain. And she says to him, this is the part where you scream, Captain. And she swings the sword at him. But the moment she like kind of gets the sword free and she's swinging it, the sword melts into liquid silver. And Ceres herself is like sinking into this pool of liquid silver at her feet. This platform is like transformed into like liquid and she can't pull her feet free. And the captain starts to like roll his eyes back in his head and he starts like shaking. He starts like seizing in the pool. And Ceres knows she's dying. She's bleeding out. The last of her blood is like leaving her. She starts to black out, but then this like black fog rolls in, comes like from the silver, and Death himself emerges out of the liquid silver. The silver is like dripping off of him in droplets. He's very tall. He lifts his sword. He goes to like kill Ceres, but then he stops when he sees that she's holding this ancient sword, and the captain is shouting from the corner, die, Heron bellowed. I will not take your lies and your serpent tongue. Choke on it. Die. And then the big figure that just emerged from the silver turns on Heron. And he says, obsidian broken everywhere, down in the ground, in the passageways, in the walls, they can't move, in the ground, I can't, it won't die, it has to. And the figure is like, hey, where's Madra? And the captain doesn't answer as he continues to like sink down into the silver. And Ceres kind of assumes this figure as like Death itself coming to claim her. And Death says to Ceres, I can't pull it out of you. Your fate is sealed, Captain. You deserve far worse. Oh, I guess he says that to the captain. Death heads towards her. He gives her this silver chain. He like loops it around her. And then he says to her, he loops this silver chain around her neck. And then he says to her, if you die before you can give this back, I'm not going to be happy. And then he picks her up and she like blacks out from the pain. Next thing she knows, Ceres is waking up. It's freezing cold and she's in a gorgeous feather bed in a gorgeous little bedroom. She assumes she's still in the palace because like, where else would she be? And she's never seen any place this grand. So like, she's like, why am I in a nice bedroom in the palace? And she can see her breath, which is how she knows it's like quite chilly. The door opens and a woman walks in and she says, Master Eskin said you'd wake up today, and here I was doubting him. I should know better by now. And the girl gives her a drink of water and asks how she's feeling. And Ceres is like just like chugging the water that she's been given because she's sure that there's been a mistake and soon someone will realize that like she accidentally got brought to this bedroom and is being given glasses of water instead of being sent to like the dungeons where she assumes she is. And the woman introduces herself as Everlane and then asks for Ceres's name, and Ceres notices that Everlane has pointed ears. And Sarah realizes that the queen had just been talking about the Fae. Last thing she remembers, and here she is in front of one. And Ceres asks her, like, you're Fae? And Everlane says, of course I am. And Sarah says, but you're not real. And Everlane says, clearly I am real. You have a concussion. Drink some water and continue resting. And they start talking about the stories that Ceres had been told as a child about the Fae that are clearly like inaccurate. And then she gives Everlane her name, and Everlane tells her Ceres is like a Fae name. And Ceres realizes that she's feeling a lot better. And Everlane explains they have very talented healers here at the Winter Palace. And they had to keep her unconscious for a few days to give her time to recover. And then like Ceres is like, hey, like, so wait a second, like, we're definitely not in the Silver City anymore, are we? And Everlane is like, nope, we're in Yvelia, more specifically the Winter Palace. So she has been transported to a new realm, the Fae realm of Yvelia. Then a scary blonde man storms into the room, and Everlane immediately starts lecturing the blonde man for scaring their new guest. And Everlyn says, why are you bursting in here anyway? And we learn the guy's name is Renfis, and he says, I came to find the human. He needs his chain back. And Lane is like, she might still need that. And Renfis is like, believe me, he needs it more than she does right now. And Lane is like, it's only been 10 days. He shouldn't be affected yet, surely. And Renfis says he's struggling. He's not supposed to take it off at all. And then Lane instructs Cerys to remove the chain that she's wearing around her neck, the chain that like death gave her. Cerys takes it off. He passes it to Renfis, who is careful not to touch it as he drops it into a pouch. And then Lane says, I want to see him before he goes. There are things that I need to ask him. And Renfis says he has to leave Lane. I've kept him hidden this long by luck alone. The guards are starting to be suspicious. If they find out he's here, he's needed back in Cahlish anyway. Write to him if you have to. Visit in a month or two, but having him stay here a moment longer than necessary would be ill-advised. And Lane says, okay, I'll write to him, but he better write back this time. And after Renfis leaves, Everlane is like, okay, time for a bath. And Cerys is like, actually, I need to go back to my house. I need to go home to my brother. And Everlane is like, that's not going to happen. And she like vaguely explains that the sword that Cerys had found is like very important, but also Cerys herself is hugely important. And she's not going to be just allowed to willingly leave. And Cerys is like, you can't keep me trapped here. This is a kidnapping. It's inhumane behavior. And Everlane says, it is inhumane behavior, but we aren't human, Cerys. We're fae. We don't behave like you. Don't think like you. Don't operate under the same moral guidelines that some of your kind do either. The faster you remember that, the easier this will be. Now, please bathe before the water gets cold. When you speak to my father, you can ask him about when you can return to the Silver City. And Sarah says, and who the hell is your father to tell me when I get to go home? And Lane says, he's Belkin Dabara, king of the Yevelian Fae. So he's the king. So that's why he gets to tell her where, when she gets to leave. Cerys goes and takes a bath. She cries the whole time because it's just like insane to her that there's just so much water at her disposal, so many resources like directly at her disposal, and there's no way for her to like give this back to the people that she loves back in Zavarin. Then Everlane helps her pick out a new outfit, and Cerys is like, I don't wear dresses, but Everlane is insistent that she needs to wear a dress to meet with the king because it's the most appropriate attire. Then Everlane does her hair too, and she compliments it and is like, oh my gosh, so gorgeous. Did you know dark hair is a sign of royal lineage here? So like, cutie that you have it. And she also gets Cerys some lip balm for the first time ever, and Cerys is like, lip balm is great. We love it. And then they're on the way to meet the king. The palace is so gorgeous. They walk through these like marble-lined hallways, and Everlane bows at each time they pass the statues of the gods. And Everlane is surprised to find out that Cerys' people no longer worship them. And Cerys explains that their temples were lost to the deserts long ago, and now Queen Madra is kind of like the only thing that they worship, or the closest thing to a god that they have. They call her the Undying Herald of the Northern Banner. And Everlane says, she's human. It's sacrilege. And even though the sand and wind swept away the name of the gods, I assure you Madra knows them. She's chosen to let them vanish from her people's history speaks volumes about her corruption. And then she kind of gives her a lowdown of all the gods. So we've got Styx, god of shadows, Kurin, god of secrets, Nicenia, goddess of masks, Malus, god of dawn and new beginnings. These two are often counted as one god. Balmithin, twin sisters, goddesses of the sky. Legend says that they once were one god, but a mighty storm came, and Balmithin refused to take shelter as it raged across the land. The powerful spirit within the storm was furious that Balmithin didn't cower before him, so he lashed her with forks of lightning. Again and again, the lightning struck Balmithin, but she did not die. Instead, she cracked and split in two, becoming Bal and Mithin. Bal is the goddess of the sun, but the goddess of the day in a looser sense, and Mithin is the goddess of the moon, but again, presides over all of the night. And Cerys actually does vaguely recognize the twin goddesses because they have a similar pair back home, although she doesn't know what a moon is because, like I mentioned, in Zilvarin, the sun is always up. There are two suns, and they are there's always one in the sky. And then Everlane touches the final statue, Zareth, the god of chaos and change. She touches his foot, which is clearly worn from all the hands touching it, and Everlane explains that just saying Zareth's name is enough to draw his attention, and they touch his foot to like turn him away from them, to like direct him far away, because they don't really want chaos following them. They keep moving through the palace, and Cerys is in awe of like all the people in all of the rooms that they walk by and through. It's freezing everywhere, even though now Ceres is like wearing more clothes. She's wearing like a shawl over her dress, but she's never been anywhere this cold. Girlie's from the desert. They head to the most elaborate room yet. The door's heavily guarded, but Everlane strolls right through them, and the guards announce her as she walks through them as Lady Everlane de Barra. And the first thing Ceres notices is that there is a giant skull behind the throne, and Everlane informs her that is the skull of the last dragon. And the king greets them. He's like, "Hey, daughter." And Everlane curtsies and says, "Your Highness." A man to his left says to her, "Do you not bow before your king, creature?" And Ceres goes, "He's not my king." And Everlane says, "Forgive her, Majesty. Your guest is tired and unaccustomed to her new surroundings." And the advisor is clearly pissed off about it. But the king says, "Quiet, Aureus. I haven't witnessed such open contempt in a long time. It's refreshing. I'll tolerate it until it grows tiresome. Step forward, girl." And then he explains that right now she's here as a guest, but so she gets some extra leniency about etiquette. But as soon as she leaves the throne room, she'll no longer be a guest, but a subject of the court, and she'll be expected to act as such. And so he will no longer be showing her mercy if she steps out of line. And he does not allow her to argue at this point. The king goes on to say, "You were brought here to fulfill a specific task. You will complete that task quickly and efficiently." And Sarah says, "I have no idea what you are talking about. I was brought here against my will." And the king says, "You would have died if we left you there." And Sarah says, like, "Okay, great. I got to get back and take care of my 20-year-old brother. He needs my help." And the king's like, "Honestly, probably he's already dead. The queen loves violence. I'm sure she's already had him murdered. You owe us a debt for saving your life. I've been told that you were the one who opened the portal. It seems highly unlikely that a human woke the Quicksilver, but after 1,000 years of waiting, we can't afford to dismiss this as heresy without checking first. Believe me when I say that we were all praying such a holy position hasn't fallen to such unholy blood, but the fates are strange, and one way or another, I will have the portals restored. If you refuse to cooperate, your time here will become much more uncomfortable." And Everlane pulls Ceres away from the dais as the king says, "Bring in the dog and let us be done with this." And then a fey male dressed all in black is brought before the king, and he is just like kicking and screaming and raging. And Ceres recognizes that it's the man that rescued her from the palace. The whole hall seems surprised to see him, and they seem both like kind of excited by his presence, but also frightened by it. And the king says, "Behold, this is the price of folly, madness, and death." And we learn his name is Kingfisher at this point. And Kingfisher tries to lunge for the king, but he's held back and eventually like taken to the ground, like tackled to the ground by all of these men kind of holding him, restraining him. And the king says his exile was not at an end, but he returned anyway. Just over a century has passed since Gil 3. Our losses have dulled. The pain stings a little less brightly, but does that mean we shall forgive? And the crowd starts shouting, some for mercy and some for an execution. And Everlane starts to get a little nervous. She whispers, just kind of like vaguely, but Ceres hears her. "He'll murder him," she whispered. "He'll work them into a frenzy until they demand his death." Everlane speaks barely louder than a whisper, but it pulls the attention of the old woman who is also standing on the dais near the king. And Everlane whispers, just so the old woman can hear, "Do something, please." The old woman makes a face like, "What do you expect me to do?" Like, the king is still trying to stir up the crowd, who is like now chanting. And Ceres is like, "He's not actually going to kill him, is he?" And Everlane, completely ignoring Ceres, like bigger fish to fry at this moment, goes, "Malway, now, if you bore my mother any love at all, you'll do something to save him." And so Malway, the old woman, stands up and is like, "The sword calls to me. I feel it. The last vestiges of the weapon's power echo with prophecy. I'm half deaf by the blasted thing ringing in my ears." And everyone is like, "What the hecky? Does the sword still retain power?" And Malway says, "I need to hold the sword to hear the prophecy in full." And the king is like, "Okay, we'll do it in private. The oracle's prophecies are for a king alone to decipher. But can you hold the sword? But you can hold the sword like as soon as I'm done here." And Malway grabs the king. "The gods must be obeyed. The gods must be obeyed lest the house of de Barra fall. This Kingfisher does not die by your hand, not today." And Ceres is like, "What is going on?" And Everlane is like, "Shut up. I need you to just like wait and watch what's happening." And the king's like, "Well, we can't just let criminals walk around amongst us." And Malway says, "Return to him that which you have taken from him. The pendant must be returned." And the king's like, "Well, the pendant contains powerful magic. It doesn't belong around the neck of a treacherous dog. It belongs to me. I'll be cold on the ground before I give it back." And Malway is like, "The gods must be obeyed lest the winter palace fall. Like, you better give that necklace back. It looks better with his outfit anyway." And the king says, "Who am I to argue with the gods? The bane will be granted his sanity for the time." And the crowd starts like jeering at this. And then a voice booms out from the crowd. "Send him back to the front." A deep voice boomed. Make him fight. Make him finish what he started. Everyone else stops shouting. And the king, trying to figure out who said that, says, explain yourself. And then Renfis emerges from the crowd. And the king's like, why are you here? You're supposed to be at the front winning me my war. And Renfis says, I returned immediately when I heard he had returned, following your orders. And the king's like, I don't recall you telling you to abandon your post. And Renfis says, the situation at Cahlish is grave. Our men die in droves every day. The beasts that patrol the enemy's borders range farther afield, claiming our sentries and outposts. Supply routes are closed to us. We are surviving on what we can hunt and gather. Within 6 months, the war will be over, and Yavalia will find itself on the wrong side of victory. So yes, your highness, I am doing what is commanded of me. You told me to win the war by any means necessary. So I came to claim the only tool that will win us back our advantage. I came for him. And the king's like, this crazy guy? You think the crazy guy is going to win you the war? And Renfis is like, as Malway has been saying, all he needs is the pendant and he will be fine. I'd rather have him fighting for us than not. And the king is like, okay, fine. And then he says, a week then. You can take him back with you in a week. Since he knows so much about the Quicksilver, he'll stay here and help Rosarius deal with the girl first. The second she's capable of waking the pool by herself, Kingfisher will once again be banished from the court. And then the king gives Renfis the chain and tells him to get Kingfisher out of his sight. It takes a moment for Kingfisher to come back to himself once the chain is on him. Everlane is nervous the whole time watching him, but then he stills. And Everlane says, we beg your leave, your highness. Saris is eager to get to work. And the king dismisses them and tells Everlane that Saris is her responsibility. So keep an eye on her. After they meet with the king, they meet up in the hallway and Everlane starts yelling at Renfis the moment they're in the hallway. And she's like, I thought you were supposed to get him out of here hours ago. What the heck? What are you doing? And Renfis is like, I got attacked the moment I left your room. Before I could get back to his, they knocked me out. And by the time I regained consciousness, he was in front of the king. And Everlane is like, okay, it's fine. We'll just have to deal with the consequences of this now. We're going to deal with it. It'll be okay. And Kingfisher is like, stop bickering about me. And Everlane is getting emotional as she berates Kingfisher for being so reckless and going through the Quicksilver pool. Saris is looking at him for the first time and realizes he's so gorgeous. She does just admire how porgy he is for a second. And then Kingfisher says to Everlane particularly, chastise me tomorrow, please. Right now I need 2 things, whiskey and a bed. And Everlane agrees to let him rest and they'll figure things out in the morning and instructs both boys to sleep in her room because it's the safest place for them. And then Everlane takes Saris back to her room. And Saris is getting a little cranky about having to be walked around the palace like she's some sort of pet. But Everlane is it's the only way I can make sure that you are safe. You can't just wander around as a human girly. And she explains that they're in the middle of a war. She's like, there's a lot happening. There's a war going on. I can't just have you running amok in the palace. In the morning, Everlane comes to get her. It's still dark outside. And this is shocking to Saris that it gets dark outside. Honestly, she doesn't seem shocked enough. If you had never seen nighttime and suddenly it's nighttime, I feel that would truly be the most terrifying thing that could happen to you. But it's still dark out, and Saris explains to Everlane their situation on how they have 2 sons back home, and one of them is always up, so it feels super weird to her that it gets nighttime for a large chunk of the time is totally dark out. And also there's snow everywhere, and Everlane explains what snow is to Saris, who's obviously never seen it. She lives in a desert that does not get rain, much less snow. And Everlane explains that, because it's the Winter Palace, they do get snow year-round up here. They go through the palace again, and Everlane takes Saris to the library, which is just, a larger space than Saris has really ever seen before, more books than she's ever seen. In the library, they meet up with Rosarius, who immediately scoops up Everlane and gives her a big hug. He's so excited to see her again and explains that he was surprised to be taken from his bed last night and called to court. So apparently he does not live in the palace, but was brought here particularly for Saris and Kingfisher's quest, as you would say. And Rosarius says, I am Rosarius, librarian and newly appointed master of this domain. And Saris introduces herself similarly in a formal manner. I'm Saris Fane, apprentice to the Undying Queen's master glassworker. I hail from the 3rd spoke in the blessed wheel of the sacred Silver City. He's mostly just shocked to see a human here. There hasn't been a human in the Fey realms for hundreds of years. And Rosarius says to her, if the Quicksilver awoke, you must be an alchemist. And Everlane is like, well, we don't know what she is quite yet. Kingfisher felt Solace calling, and he answered. He found it in Ceres's hands. And Ceres is like, what are you talking about? What is an alchemist? What is Solace? What is going on? There's a lot of swords that have important names here. Solace is the sword that was like the lever sword, I believe, in the Quicksilver pool. But like, no one is really interested in answering Ceres's questions. Everlane and Rosarius are like talking to themselves about like what might be going on. Then Kingfisher appears, and he is like, she can't just be purely human. Like, she has to have at least a drop of Fae blood in her to prevent Solace from burning off her hands, but it must not be enough to like make her appear Fae from the outside. And Everlyn is really annoyed that Kingfisher showed up by himself, which means he walked through the palace by himself without Renfis to kind of serve as backup. It's like really dangerous for him to be roaming around the palace alone. And Ceres notices he has a sword strapped to his back, and Kingfisher notices her staring and says, it's rude to stare at a man's hardware. And Ceres says, don't worry, I wasn't planning on stealing it. It isn't very impressive. It looks more like a toothpick to me. And Ren arrives then and is like, I think that one might have drawn blood. Kingfisher and Ceres like do have like mean banter back and forth like almost immediately. Like they are very adversarial in their sort of relationship, because I do feel like Ceres kind of views Kingfisher as having kidnapped her from her home, even though he did also save her life. Complicated. Kingfisher doesn't seem to pay any attention to Ren. He's like very focused in on Ceres, and he says, this sword has slain thousands. And Ceres says, I wouldn't have thought that was anything to brag about. You should probably get it looked at. Like, obviously making like a dick joke. And Rosaria says, Nimerala is a formidable sword, Alchemerian. A much lauded storied weapon of the ancients. And so that's his sword. His sword is Nimerel. Okay? You have to hold all these sword names in your head, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for it. It's not my fault. I didn't write the book. Everlane ushers everyone over to a table to start researching and shows them a few books that she wants them to look through. And Ceres is like, I want to figure out how to open the portal again and get out of here ASAP. If my friends and family are dead, as you all keep insisting, I want to see their bodies and bury them. And Everlane is like, well, it's been over a week. I'm sure it's already too late for that. And Ceres says, do you have a brother? And Everlane says, I do. And Ceres says, and wouldn't you want to know for certain one way or another if he was dead or alive? And Everlane says, unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than that. And Kingfisher is like, humans are usually so fickle, but I admire this one's loyalty. She values her family above all else. There's something to be said for that. And then he goes on to say, I think there's a decent chance your people are still alive. Queen Madra will be a little distracted by the threat of the portal being reopened, and the threat of war on her doorstep she might have forgotten to murder your brother, essentially. She'll need an army to stand against the Fae, and she might want to recruit your brother rather than kill him. The king will want a war because she had cut off all these trade routes, and there are rumors that the Dianthius heir is in Zilvarin somewhere. Okay? So the big thing that she did was she closed all the trade routes. There was no ability to trade, which caused like a lot of economic issues, obviously. And also there is rumors that the Dianthius heir is trapped in Zilvarin somewhere. Do we know what a Dianthius is at this point? No. Eventually we'll learn, probably. And then Ceres says, so only one of these alchemists can open these pathways between Yavalia and Zilvarin, right? Everlyn says, it's really dangerous, and we're not even sure it was you the last time, so, like, don't even worry about it. And Kingfisher says, literally no one else was there. She was standing in the room holding Solace, so I think it was her. If I were capable of activating it, I would have razed that infernal city to the ground a long time ago. And Everlyn is like, well, you shouldn't have given her the pendant. And Kingfisher is like, well, I still had the ring. And Everlyn says, it wasn't enough. You took more in, didn't you? And Kingfisher says, what does that even matter? I got the sword. I even got a new pet for you. One capable of performing fancy magic tricks that'll make all of our lives better. So let's just get on with this, shall we? And Everlyn is like, we're going to fix this. And Kingfisher says, nothing to fix, only a human to teach and a queen to put in the ground. And then Ren says, don't forget, there's a real war going on. The real war with Sansaroth is killing members of your court, our court, every single day. And Kingfisher says, the last time I fought in that war, the city burned to the ground. I think I've shed enough blood for Yavalia, brother. And then Renfis says, then shed it for your friends. Let King Belkin deal with her and help me. And then Kingfisher turns to Ceres and says, have you ever channeled a metal's energy before? And Ceres thinks back to all of like her little like party tricks that she was able to like hear metal's vibrations and like make them move. And she goes, yeah, I have. And Kingfisher says, do you have any experience working in a forge? And Ceres says, yes, I know my way around a forge, because that's sort of what she did back in Zilvarin, in the Silver City. Are glassmaker forges and blacksmith forges the same thing? Because this book seems to imply that they kind of are. Because she, like, worked at the Glassmakers. But, like, she will do metal work here and, like, seems, like, quite comfortable with doing metal work. To the extent that it makes me think that, like, she was doing both back in Silvarin. They're on a walk through the palace again next time we catch up with them, and Renfis is saying, they won't let you in. There's no way. The bastards have been guarding that door since the dawn of time. Kingfisher insists. They have to. They have no other choice. Saris is, like, running after the boys, trying to keep up with them. She's thinking about everything she's just learned in the library about, like, kind of, like, the situation in Yavalia. And Everlyn says we shouldn't rush into this without considering the consequences. We need to cover theory first. And Kingfisher is like, what theory? And Renfis is like, he's right. There's no written accounts of the alchemist process anywhere. Like, sitting around discussing theory isn't going to help us actually get closer to figuring out how to deal with all of this. And Everlyn is like, we'll start out slow then with the important things she needs to know about Yavalia. She won't be able to survive here without. And Kingfisher, like, stops and spins around, and it says, like, really insistently, all you really need to know is that you are the only human living in all of Yavalia. You are not safe here. There was a time that this place teemed with your kind, but our ancestors were cursed millennia ago with these, and he points at his fangs, and we use them to drink your kind dry. We may not need blood to maintain our immortality anymore, but by gods, do we still have the teeth for it? And Everlyn is like, Fisher, why are you being like this? Like, stop scaring my new friend. And Kingfisher is like, you should be used to that by now, Lane. Or did you spend the last century forgetting what a shit I am? I'm the bane of Gil 3, remember? The Black Knight. And Lane is like, yeah, I know that, but I wish you weren't sometimes. And Ren seems like it's a little surprised at the outburst. Kingfisher kind of, like, jerks back as, like, Everlyn kind of, like, scolds him for this behavior. It's not, like, something typical. She's normally, like, pretty, like, soft with him, I think. And Kingfisher says to her, careful, sister. We don't want to spill all our secrets now in one go. And so it comes out, I think I forgot to pull the line, but it comes out that Kingfisher and Everlyn are siblings, or half siblings. We'll come to find out. Everlyn storms off, and Saris is like, I should go check to make sure she's okay. And Ren is like, I'll accompany you because, again, you shouldn't be wandering around the court alone. But then Kingfisher is like, no, come with me. He says, oh, come on. She's not going to come with you. She's coming with me, aren't you? Oh, Shelleth. She wants to know the secrets, and I'm the only one willing to give them to her. Saris says, why are you calling me that? Oh, Shelleth. What does it mean? Kingfisher says, oh, Shelleth is a type of butterfly. Osha for short. They hatch, live, and die all in one day. The cold kills them very quickly. He, like, says it's because she's, like, so fragile and she's going to die, like, so soon because she's, like, a human. Saris does wind up going with Kingfisher because she does want to learn secrets from him. And Ren is like, that's fine. I'll come get you in a couple hours. She's like, Everlyn really doesn't need me. And I do need some answers from Kingfisher. Kingfisher takes her to this, like, very plain door, and Saris wants to knock, but no one's there. And Saris is like, okay, you go first in case this door is warded by magic. But Kingfisher explains that, like, he knows there's no magic on the door, no wards, because he's magic, and so he knows magic when he feels it. They walk inside, and it's been used to be a forge, but clearly has been abandoned for a while because vines are climbing the walls and frost covers, like, every surface, and all the tools are kind of, like, rusted. It's just, like, totally a mess. Kingfisher is so annoyed that the forge hasn't been, like, kept in working condition because obviously, well, I guess not obviously, yeah, but, like, the main task that Saris is going to need to be doing is working in this forge, and so, like, now she doesn't have a forge to work in because this one is a disaster. Saris immediately starts, like, the work of cleaning it up because she knows it needs to be used again and she wants to get back to her house. Kingfisher is surprised by, like, her agency and, like, just starting on cleaning it, but Saris is like, you know what, unless you can clear it with magic, this is the only way it's going to get done. And Kingfisher is like, that is not how Fey magic works. I don't do spells. Our magic is sacred, only to be used for righteous purposes. And Saris is like, okay, then help me clean with your hands. She asks him, are there any other royal residences for other seasons? She's, like, started on her Q&A. And Kingfisher's like, don't waste your questions on stupid questions. Okay, like, why do we care about what the other palaces are? That's not important to you. And Saris then is like, okay, fine. And she points at Kingfisher's pendant and says, all right, what is that? What does it do? And why are you completely unhinged without it? And Kingfisher says, ruthless. I like it. To explain the pendant, there are other things you need to know first. Things Lane probably hasn't told you. And then Kingfisher explains that the Quicksilver pools, the pool they pass through to get from the Silver City to the Winter Palace, are pathways that connect different realms, and the stuff itself is dangerous. It is, like, a little bit sentient. It's, like, a little unclear, but, like, Quicksilver has weird vibes. And if it comes in contact with bare skin, it's not good. And then Saris remembers that the dagger that Heron had made him start seeing things when it touched his skin. Like, the Quicksilver had made him start to hallucinate. And Kingfisher explains that alchemists forged the Quicksilver into weapons for Fae warriors. And so when the weapons can be held by the Fae, but if anyone who is not Fae touches these weapons, it makes them start hallucinating from the Quicksilver. And Ceres is like, alchemists inherited their abilities, so it's about blood. And Kingfisher says everything's about blood. And then he's ready to explain the pendant. He goes, my mother gave me this pendant, this relic, when I was 11, the night before we left for the Winter Palace. She knew I'd have need of it. Later, when I came of age and joined Belkin's army, I was called upon to travel between Yavalia and the other realms because my pendant was one of the most powerful. To cut a long and very boring story short, I was forced to travel pathways without it once. The Quicksilver took me, just as it takes everyone. A healer managed to draw most of it from me once I made it back to the Winter Palace, but I was left with a few lasting reminders. Most Fae only wore their relics when they traveled from one realm to the next, but wearing mine is the only thing that calms the noise in my head. Without it, the line between what's real and what isn't blurs very quickly. So essentially, he traveled through the Quicksilver pool without his pendant once, and he has now Quicksilver poisoning, and so he needs to wear the pendant at all times, otherwise the Quicksilver kind of drives him a little mad. And also, so Ceres needed to travel through the Quicksilver pool to get from the Silver City here, and that's why she was given the pendant, is so she could make that trip through the Quicksilver pool without enduring the consequences of traveling without it, which would have been for her really bad, probably would have killed her. And then he goes on to explain that he saved her because Queen Madra had stopped all the pools with the sword in that one pool. So she had taken the sword, which was Solace, that sword, she had plunged it into the Quicksilver pool, which had stopped not just that pool, but every single pool. And so they haven't been able to use those pathways between realms for supplies. As soon as the Quicksilver pool opened, he went through it, realized that Ceres is the one who probably opened it, and they need an alchemist, they need her. And so he brought her back to the Winter Palace. They spend the rest of the afternoon cleaning in the forge, mostly in silence, which is crazy to me. Does she really not have any other questions? This is Q&A time, and she's just cleaning in silence. Ask other stuff. After a few hours, Ren does come and find her, and he's shocked to find that they haven't even started working yet, that they're still cleaning. And Ceres is like, well, what were you supposed to do? This place was a total mess. And then Kingfisher makes everything go black and cold, and then the smoke kind of fills the room and then immediately clears. When the light returns to the room, the forge is immaculate and warm. And Ceres says, we broke our backs cleaning this place. What's wrong with you? What happened to our abilities, our sacred gifts to be used only for righteous purposes? Or whatever the hell it was that you said. And Renfis is laughing. And Kingfisher is like, I just wanted to see if you knew what hard work was. I told you I was magic. Ew. And I bought into the romance by the end of this book. Yes, of course. Is Kingfisher literally vile and disgusting in most of the scenes he's in? Yeah, also true. He's got evil metal poisoning in his blood. Totally get that. But still, some of these things are the reddest of red flags. And yet, we persist. The next morning, Everlane brings Ceres breakfast with fruit and yogurt. And Ceres wants to ask about the brother comet and kind of interrogate a little bit further what's going on between Everlane and Fisher, but doesn't want to cause strife between them. Everlane is clearly a little upset still that Ceres didn't follow her when she was upset yesterday and instead went with Kingfisher. We move on. Everlane invites her to come to the library where her and Russ have gathered all the information available on alchemists that they could find in their collection. Ceres agrees to come with. She wants to learn as quickly as she can so she can get out of there. They get to the library. Rosarius is pissed off because Fisher has brought his breakfast into the library, and his breakfast is a plate of meats. And it's just not appropriate given the level of grease and the books. He's like, I will eat crackers in here sometimes, but I will eat them so the crumbs go out the window. No grease allowed. And crumbs are actually really bad too. And crumbs are bad because crumbs will bring rodents, and rodents will eventually eat books. You really don't want to have food in the library. Gotta eat your snacks ahead of time. Renfis apologizes on Kingfisher's behalf, saying, I don't know what you can think I can do about it. The day I manage to make Kingfisher do anything is the day the Corcoran returns. And Russ says, blasphemy. And Sarah says, where did your gods actually go? Lane explains that they set off on a pilgrimage. I would love to know more about this. What the hecky? But we don't explain further because she needs to go deal with the Fisher meat situation. She's like, I gotta go diffuse that. And then we can chat about more things. And so Lane goes and takes Fisher's plate away from him, and then he decides to see himself out and eat elsewhere. And he tells Ceres that he'll see her in the forge in the afternoon. So the plan is that she'll hang out with everyone down here in the morning. In the afternoon, she'll head to see Kingfisher to actually do some work in the afternoon. And Renfist says, I'll go train with him and let him blow off some steam. He's having a rough time. He's got no place to stay here, and he was in that place for 110 years. Everlane is, like, clearly upset by the conversation and this bringing up of, like, wherever Kingfisher was for those 110 years, which is, like, the big question that no one will answer. Everyone's walking around it. Once both boys are gone, Elaine starts shuffling through the papers on her table. And she says, let's start with what you know about the alchemical practices and how they might be used. And Sarah says, like, I don't even know what alchemical means. So let's start there. Elaine is like, okay, you know what? Maybe that's even better. There are no bad habits for us to break. Like, we're starting from square one. That could be good. That could be great. We'll start from the beginning. But overall, Everlane kind of seems like a little thrown off by just, like, all of her interactions with the boys that morning. And Sarah asks about it. She's like, Everlane, you seem like a little flustered. Are you okay? And she's like, I'm fine. He's the best thing in my life, the only good thing, and he's gone. I knew he would be hard to see, but it's hard to see and accept. Then Rosarius comes back from wherever he was before, and he has brought crackers. He's like, guys, I brought us a snack. Let's lean out the window and eat these together. Saris is then taught the basics of alchemy. It's an old form of magic that was once myth to the Fae, but once there had been 3 branches of alchemists: immortality, transmutation of metals, and curing of illnesses. And Saris is likely the second type, this, like, transmutation of metals. There aren't really records on how the metals were transformed, but there are records that indicate the alchemists were successful because they have made a bunch of, like, silver to gold to, like, fill the royal coffers at some point. And also at some point, Quicksilver was created, and its ability to, like, create paths between realms was discovered. No one knows how they controlled the Quicksilver, except that they used their magic to do so. Rosarius explains, it's hotly debated whether they controlled it at all. According to most documents from around that time, the second order of alchemists lived very short lives. They often went mad and killed themselves. Saris is like, okay, sick. That sounds, like, promising for me as an alchemist. And they're like, mm-hmm. But mostly she's just, like, really eager to figure out how this whole situation works and get home to Hayden as quickly as possible. Saris is looking through one of the books, and then she's like, wait a second, how can I read this? I'm from an entirely different realm, and we share a written language that feels impossible. And Everlane is like, you're speaking, and this book is written in Common Fae. There are other languages in Yabelia, but Common Fae is shared by all the courts. The humans adopted our language, in Zelvarin at least. Zelvarin had Madra, and your queen has always spoken Common Fae. And Saris is like, you seem to know a lot about our queen. And Everlane is like, Madara, she was young when she ascended to the Zelvarian throne, bloodthirsty and hungry for power. And Sarah says, but how can she be so old if she's human? How has she managed to reign for over 1,000 years? How could she have closed all the pathways with that sword if she wasn't an alchemist? And Everlane is like, we don't know how she did it. She should have died centuries ago, but you don't need to be a fae or to possess any special gift in order to close the door between our realms. The sword will do it for you, and all the Quicksilver pools are connected by a ribbon of energy. If you take the sword like Solace and plunge it into the Quicksilver, it severs that energy and freezes all the pathways. And then we learn that Everlane is 1,486 years old, even though she looks like she's about 28. And Kingfisher is 1,733 years old. Kingfisher arrives back in the library as Everlane is talking about how old he is. He's here to pick up Saris for her afternoon forging session. Saris asks about, like, what happened to the Fae who were, like, traveling when the Quicksilver froze. And Everlane is like, they could still be alive, yes, but the realms they were visiting were volatile places, and it's unlikely that old age killed any of them, but local clans likely did for a lot of them. Then Kingfisher takes her to the forge again, and he's like, next time you have questions about me, ask me, not my sister. And Saris is like, I don't believe you would have answered me. And Kingfisher said, if it was a good question, I would have answered. The forge is looking, like, really nice, really tidy, spick and span after his little magic trick yesterday. And Saris says, you were banished from the Yavalian court because you did something bad. Belkin says you razed an entire city to the ground. And Kingfisher's like, that's not a question. And Sarah says, did you do it? And Kingfisher says, why do you want to know? And Sarah says, because this is a very small space, so I'd like to know if I'm with a murderer. And Kingfisher says, yes, I did. And Sarah goes, why? And Kingfisher says, I didn't have a choice, but he's less interested in telling her the rest of the story. And then she asks about where he spent the last century, and he leans in really, really close and replies, hell. And then Kingfisher presses something into the palm of her hand, and she's, like, smelling him. She's overwhelmed with the smell of, I think he smells like minty. I don't remember. I didn't write it down. He has a very signature book boyfriend scent, of course. And she's so busy smelling that she doesn't really recognize what's happening until he's pressing this thing into her hand, and then suddenly her palm is burning. She's trying to pull away, but he won't release her, and he says, tell me what it is. And Sarah says, like, it's hurting me. That's what it is. And she's trying to pull away, but he, like, keeps holding on. And Kingfisher says, is it hot or cold? Soft or sharp? And Sarah says, cold. It's cold. It's burning. It's so cold. It hurts. Let go, Fisher. Please make it stop. And Kingfisher says, you can make it stop. And Sarah says, I can't. But Kingfisher's is like, you can do it. Just listen. He's still holding on to her and insisting that she listen. And Kingfisher is taunting her as she's screaming at him to let her go. She's in just like immense pain from this like burning something being pressed into her palm. Sarah starts to sob and Kingfisher is still like, you can do it. Like, you are stronger than you think and you can stop this. And then she hears it. It's like a million little voices are saying, Anortha more. Anortha more. Anorthrath more. And she screams out the words at Kingfisher. Kingfisher doesn't move away from her, but he loosens his grip on her hand, and the center of her palm is a liquid ball of Quicksilver. She tries to like fling it away, but Kingfisher holds on to her. And he says, so as long as I am touching you, you are safe. I'm wearing the pendant. It won't harm us. And Saris says, what are you talking about? It won't harm us. It nearly froze me from the inside out. And Kingfisher says, that was just a test. You passed. Now make it still. And Saris is like, I have no idea how. And Kingfisher says, feel it in your mind. Reach for it. And she closes her eyes and tries to ignore her fear from the thing in her hand, but she can feel it. And Kingfisher tells her, tell it to sleep. The metal answers, no sleep, not now, slept for too long. But Saris is firm. Sleep. And it obeys, and then like the weight of it lifts from her mind. She immediately like feels better. And Kingfisher says to her, I have to say, I was expecting that to go differently. And Saris punches him square in the mouth. Cut to the next morning. Lane is cinching Saris into a corseted gown, and Saris is complaining about it. Like, she'd really prefer to wear pants. Her and Everlane are talking about how Saris had punched Kingfisher yesterday, and Saris insists that he deserved it, but won't go into the specifics with Everlane because she doesn't want to make things more tense between them. Kingfisher, after she had punched him in the mouth, had picked her up, kicking and screaming, flung her over his shoulder, and carried her back to her bedroom, and dropped her on the bed and said, bad human. And Everlane says, well, it could have been worse. And Everlane explains that the fact that they're like siblings, her and Kingfisher, is not a widely known fact. And it's like quite a complicated thing. They're only half siblings, and his father was sent on a mission. They have the same mom. His father was sent on a mission to Zilvarin, which he never returned from. And then after that, their mother married again to King Belkin. And the king said that Finrin, Fisher's father, was responsible for the Quicksilver stealing and declared him a traitor to the Fae. And Saris is a little confused because that's not the story she had heard about the Quicksilver from Kingfisher. But the truth is they like don't really know for sure what happened because like the door closed, and like that is the last they heard from the other realms. But the king blames Kingfisher's father. The king is not a fan of Kingfisher at all, and when he married their mom, their shared mom, he wanted a son ASAP, but when Kingfisher's mother had Everlane, she died during childbirth. So there are no princes afoot. Everlane goes to fetch breakfast and is like, we'll go to the library after we eat. But while she's in the room alone, Saris is thinking about what happened with the Quicksilver the day before. She can't stop hearing those words, Anortha more. She says to herself, I kept repeating it to myself over and over again as if it were an answer to a question I didn't know how to ask. Kingfisher had been surprised when she'd said it, but he hadn't explained what it meant. She opens the door expecting it to be Everlane with breakfast, but it's just Kingfisher with his tray of meats, and he's got a new suit of armor on. Saris is like, why are you here in my room? And he's like really in a bad mood because he's cranky and hungover. And Kingfisher says, apparently I'm not allowed to eat in the library, and unlike Lane, I don't have my own assigned wing of the court. After seeing how nice your rooms were yesterday, I figured I'd come here to eat breakfast. Don't worry, I brought you some cheese. And Saris says, Rosaria said no cooked food, and all of that is cold meats, so go bother him. Kingfisher says, today has rules, human. Do not shout. Do not throw any punches. Do not make me do any physical exercise. Because, again, he's a little hungover. And then Kingfisher's lip starts bleeding, and Saris comments on it. And then Kingfisher makes a comment about how he has an excellent sense of smell, essentially implying that he knows that she's turned on. I don't think Saris recognizes this in the moment because she clearly hasn't read enough book about Fae. But as a girl who has read plenty of book about Fae, I know when they start talking about their sense of smell, they're like smelling things that we don't, that's like a lot. It's a lot every time. I would be fine if they didn't have such a great sense of smell. I'm reading the Twilight books right now over on Patreon, and Edward has a great sense of smell. I bet he could smell that, but he never comments on it. He's never a weirdo about it. Polite manners. Have some decorum. And Saris goes, why haven't you gotten your lip healed? And Kingfisher says, I've decided to keep it as a souvenir. So it's from where she punched him yesterday. And Sarah says, a reminder of the time a weak human girl landed a hit on you and drew blood. You want your friends knowing about that? And Kingfisher says, I like being surprised. I'm also a fan of aggressive foreplay. It'll be a fun reminder. And then just then Everlane arrives back in the room and is like, what the heck is going on in here? Are you trying to get that girl killed? Like, what did you do to her? Because she's like choking on something, I think. I don't know. Sometimes my notes are not totally coherent. Everlane goes on to say, she's choking to death, Fisher. Did you poison her? Breathe, Sarah. That's it. Slowly in and out. I think she's choking after the foreplay comment. Everlane demonstrates breathing in through her nose. And why does it smell like a brothel in here? If you're going to spend the night out whoring and drinking, the least you could do is wash the smell of sex off before you showed up at breakfast. Sarah's knows, and Kingfisher knows that, like, the brothel isn't the smell. It's Sarah's. She's like, whoa, a bleeding lip. I need to change my undergarments. Kingfisher apologizes to Lane and says, that was inconsiderate. I'll take my breakfast and leave you two in peace. I'll see you this afternoon, Osha. And Ceres is surprised he didn't tell on her for being the one stinking up the place with her horniness, but, he can have some discretion when he chooses. They head to the library, Everlane and Ceres, and Russ announces that it's going to snow tonight. And Ceres is, a little excited about being able to see the snow fall from the sky with her own eyes. And then she asks, I want to learn more about the Quicksilver today. I know we're supposed to learn more about the courts, but I only have a week before Kingfisher is supposed to leave, and it's already been 3 days. Lane is worried about Ceres needing knowledge of the courts when she needs to travel outside of Yavalia, and worried about skipping ahead. But Rosarius agrees with Ceres saying, maybe Ceres is right. If we can't demonstrate that Ceres is capable of activating the Quicksilver, there'll be trouble for Kingfisher, I think. He's the one who brought her here. The king gave him a week to teach our new friend here how to navigate this whole thing. If she fails, and Lane says, he'll punish Fisher. And Russ says, and perhaps Ceres too. And so Lane agrees to talk about the Quicksilver today. First, Ceres asks how the pathways work, and Russ explains that that the alchemists were just able to, or anyone traveling through the Quicksilver was just able to focus their intentions very strongly on a place. If it was a new place, they would think about the things they wanted from that place, or a feature they'd like to discover, and then the Quicksilver would pull them towards that place. But he explains that especially for new places, it was kind of a risky way to travel because you could end up somewhere that also fit that description. And Ceres says, where's the pool here in the Winter Palace? I assume Belkin has one. And Rosarius is like, of course, our pool is the largest ever documented. It can transport whole armies if needed. It is very deep below the palace, but almost every tunnel will lead directly there. Rosarius continues to talk for the next 3 hours, and Ceres tries to pay attention as he conveys all of his knowledge about the Quicksilver and the alchemists. That afternoon, Ceres joins Kingfisher in the forge, and he has the fires blazing, and she is warm for the first time since she arrived. Kingfisher is shirtless because it's hot in there, and he's all sweaty, and he teases her for staring at him. And we also learn that the Fae in this world cannot lie. They can, walk their way around the truth, but they can't directly lie. And then they banter about whether Fisher should call her by her name or not. And Fisher is experimenting with some bone, with some Fae bone. He's hoping to fuse some Quicksilver onto the Fae bone to see if they can trick the pool into thinking the living creature passing through it is part of it. As he's explaining this, Sarah sees out of the corner of her eye something moving in the forge, and she freaks out because she thinks someone is in the forge with them. But it's just a fox. Sarah hasn't ever seen a fox before, which is crazy because there are desert foxes, but I guess in Sylvarin they're not foxes. And Kingfisher goes to kill the fox, but Ceres is no, we destroyed its home. Clearly it lived in this forge. We can't just murder it because it's in its home and we like it here. And the Kingfisher's it's gonna bite you. You can't just let wild animals hang out. And Ceres is no, it won't. It immediately bites her. Doesn't waste a second biting her. And Kingfisher starts talking about how many diseases foxes carry. Meanwhile, the fox is still actively biting Ceres. And Ceres is trying to gently talk to this fox and promising it that they'll make it a new home, and if they let it go, and eventually it does let go of Ceres, kind of sensing her good intentions, and hides in her skirts. Kingfisher teases her about the dress she's wearing, and Ceres is this is not my choice of outfit. And Kingfisher uses his magic to make the fox a little cage with food and water, and also changes Ceres' outfit into a pants shirt combo. It's normal clothes, not exactly the same clothes she was wearing when she arrived, but kind of a Fae take on a similar outfit. And it also includes a weapons belt where she has a dagger. They work on this bone Quicksilver project that Kingfisher has started. They don't really make any progress, though. By the time it's time for them to go, Ceres is sweaty and exhausted, and she is just staring at Kingfisher's tattoos. I believe he's shirtless at this point. He's taken his shirt off, and he has these sweeping lines and paths that cover him. And she wants to ask about them, but also doesn't want to because they're enemies. Duh. Ceres mentions that if she can feel the pendant, she might be able to kind of like sense what's in it using her alchemy magic, and see if there's like another element bonded with it. And Kingfisher's like, okay, you can come over and feel it. And Sarah says like, can't you just like take it off so I can hold it? And Kingfisher says, Ren had me trapped in a room with 3-foot thick walls locked behind an iron door the whole time that the pendant was off of me. So what do you think? And Sarah's like, okay, never mind. And so she comes up to him, she holds his necklace. Obviously, she needs to be like quite close to him, and obviously chemistry is happening. Sparks are flying between the two of them. They're inches apart. Kingfisher is like, anything? And Sarah says like a little flustered, and she's like, oh, give me a second. And then he mentions that Fae have heightened senses, and he can smell her, and he can also hear her heartbeat. And he's like, your heart is going crazy. And he raises a hand and is holding it to her chest, where her heart is beating wildly. He's biting, and then he like picks up his pendant and he puts it in his mouth. And he says to her, with this the pendant in his mouth, he's like mumbling through something in his mouth. He's like, I thought was funny, I feel ones. Like, how do you say that cute? Like, this is supposed to be like a sultry moment, but I do know his necklace is in his mouth the whole time. And I just don't know how you can talk in a sultry way if you've got stuff in your mouth, like items in there. But he says to her, I've slept with plenty of humans. Does that surprise you? I'm actually, it does surprise me. I'm actually calling HR. Hello? HR, the man you sent to help me learn how to do this, who also kidnapped me from my house, is now telling me about how many people we've slept with. Yeah, it's spooky. She doesn't call HR. There's no HR here in Yavalia. I don't think there's one in Zavarin either. The Fae need HR. Sarah says to him, yeah, I am surprised that you've slept with a lot of humans. I thought you hated us. Kingfisher says, I don't hate your kind. I'm just disappointed by how breakable you are. If I held you down and effed you the way I'm imagining effing you right now, I doubt that you'd survive. 911, we're escalating from HR. 911, this man is being scary. I would like a trusted adult to escort me out of here. Saris doesn't say this. She just says, I wouldn't sleep with you if you were the last living thing on this earth. I don't know if she says earth. Because again, I think they're on a different planet. And Kingfisher says, don't bother lying with your heart betraying you so loudly. And Sarah says, my heart is beating fast because I'm scared of you. Reasonable. You're holding me against my will. And Kingfisher says, really? You could pull away at any time. And then he mentions again that he can smell her. Then the flirting gets like really gross. It really escalates to a level that I'm going to have to block out. Like, it was traumatic to me as a reader. And then he's like, you could kiss me if you wanted. And Sarah says, like, why would I want to do that? And he says, because you're intrigued, because you're bored, because you're super aroused right now, and you want to follow through on whatever little fantasies are playing out in your head. And Sarah says, like, okay, if I kiss you, will you just, like, sit there? And Fisher says, find out. And then she leans in and kisses him, and it starts to, like, escalate. Things are, like, happening. She's, like, humping him. In their place of work. This is an OSHA violation. And she finds herself straddling him, and then he says something that I cannot repeat about how if she continues with her humping of him in his lap, he will have no choice but to, like, bend her over, essentially. Escalation. A real escalation here. Sarah's like, that wakes her up. She pulls herself away from him. She goes to, like, the other side of the forge, as far away as she can get, and she says that is not going to happen again. And Kingfisher says, if you say so, little OSHA. And Kingfisher is like, I need to walk you back to your rooms. And then she's like, LOL, no, you were just like the creepiest creeper. I don't want you to hang out with me. And Kingfisher is like, okay, then you can wait here and I'll go get Renfis. And he can walk you back. She's like, okay, fair enough. And then Kingfisher, as he's leaving, comments on her hummingbird heartbeat. The moment he's, like, gone, Saris grabs a bag that she had packed earlier, and she starts running. She knows she's not going to have much time before Kingfisher comes looking for her, and she's also stuck the fox in the bag. She goes down the first staircase she comes across, and she just, like, continues going down whenever she can, because she's following the instructions she got from Asarius to get to this pool. She knows that if she just goes deep enough, she will eventually come across the pool of Quicksilver. She runs down, like, I think, like, 12 or 15 stories, like, into the, like, downstairs of the palace. When she's deep enough down, though, there are only, like, soldiers walking around. Like, regular fae of upstairs are not there, and she's starting to have to, like, duck into alcoves to avoid them. And then she starts to hear the Quicksilver whispering to her, calling her closer and closer to this pool. Her fox is, like, squiggling around in its bag. It's not having a nice time. It's not on board with this situation. And then Saris goes through this door, and it's, like, this super dark tunnel, and it's, like, very low to the ground. She has to, like, crawl through it. She continues to hear the Quicksilver telling her to come this way. Then she emerges into this big cavern where there's a giant silver pool in the center of it all. The pool of Quicksilver is absolutely enormous. Come, the pool beckoned, be with us. We won't hurt you. The fox is freaking out, and Ceres goes to like comfort it, and it jumps out of the bag and like sprints off. And Ceres is like, okay, bye. I guess you don't have to hang out with me anymore. In fact, and then she like thinks about it for a second. She's like, it's probably for the best. Like, there's no way I would have been able to keep that fox alive in the deserts of Zilvarin. Like, it belongs here. It'll be able to find its way out. It'll be safe. She's preparing herself to step into this pool and is like, fingers crossed that the pool won't burn me up like the Quicksilver did. But she can feel the pool in her mind. And while that drop of Quicksilver was like this burning pressure, this feels so much bigger. It feels like she's like floating in the pool of it. It like feels completely different in her mind. And she starts to think about Zilvarin, her foot like hovering above the pool, when Kingfisher tackles her to the ground. And he says to her, leaving without saying goodbye? I'm hurt. And Ceres is like, I don't owe you anything. And Kingfisher is like, you owe me your life. And Ceres says, I'm going home, Kingfisher. You can't stop me. And then he's got his sword out and he's like threatening Ceres. And he's like, apparently I can, you little thief. And he points at the signet ring that she stole during their kiss. So she was being a tricky trickster during that massive HR violation. And she was kissing Kingfisher because he's really hot, but also to steal stuff from him, which makes it a little better. She tries to like smack the blade away from her, which seems like a bad idea in general. But this blade is magic. And so as soon as she touches her, she like is in utter agony. And Kingfisher explains that only the person sealed to it can touch an active Alchemerian sword. I would have warned you not to do that, but you never listened to me, do you, human? And Ceres is like, I needed that ring so I could go home. I'm not sorry, and you wouldn't be either if you were me. And Kingfisher says, if you would have stepped into that pool, you would have died. And Ceres says, no, I have your ring. I got a relic, duh. And Kingfisher is like, that ring isn't a relic. It's a trinket, nothing more. It wouldn't have protected you as you went through the Quicksilver. And Ceres is confused because Kingfisher had told Lane that he had used that ring to come through the Quicksilver pool because he had given his pendant to Ceres. But he hadn't actually said that the ring had protected him, just that he'd been wearing it when he went through the Quicksilver. He was being a tricky trickster. Tricked Lane into thinking that he'd been protected. He actually just kind of gave himself more Quicksilver poisoning, which is why he didn't want to say anything to Lane because he didn't want to stress her out. Kingfisher explains that he has spent a lot of time building up the strength and mental barriers of his mind, which is why he's been able to pass through the pool without consequences, he does have consequences. He's literally like a rabid dog when he doesn't have that pendant on, but like he's alive. And Ceres is like, I really need to get back to my family. I'm not going to stop trying. And Kingfisher says, you're going to stay here and you're going to figure out how to create relics for us. You're going to figure out how to manipulate the Quicksilver if it's the last thing you do. And Ceres says, I promise you, I won't let you. I will let you torture me first. I will not help the Fae, not until I know what's happened back in Zilvarin. I can't. And Kingfisher says, it won't be me you're hurting. It'll be Belkin, and even I can't withstand him. And Ceres says, well, I guess I'll die then. And Kingfisher says, foolish girl, you have no idea what you are talking about. But Ceres is like insistent that she's going to like make it work. And Kingfisher says, fine, you get one. I'll go and try to get one of those humans who are so precious to you, and I will try to bring them back to you. In return, you'll agree to do whatever I ask of you to help me forge new relics and any other instruments I deem fit. And Ceres says, you'd really do that? I'd want 2 humans though, Hayden and Elroy. And Kingfisher is like, you only get 1. Okay, I can't go get 2. And he explains that he like literally cannot go get 2 because he's going to have to take his pendant off and give it to whoever he's transporting, and he'll have to travel through the Quicksilver again without protection, and he can't do that twice in one day. Like there are lines even for him, which does like seem like a very solid reason. And Ceres like agrees as much, and she's okay. If you just get Hayden, I will agree to that. They seal it with like a drop of blood, which means that it is a blood oath that will be binding until they die. So Kingfisher promises to try to bring back her brother, and then she promises to like listen to him and do whatever it takes to like make the relics. Okay, great. Kingfisher asks for something of Hayden's to help him find Hayden, but Ceres is like, I don't have anything of his. I was kidnapped from the palace. And Kingfisher's like, okay, your blood actually should be sufficient as long as you guys have the same parents. And she's like, we do. And he's like, okay, great. Kingfisher leaves and immediately gives Ceres instructions to close the gate the moment he crosses through it. And he explains that the gate is open. All the gates are open. So feeders could burst through the moment he's gone if she leaves it open. So she's supposed to close it after he goes through, leave it closed for an hour, open it, and then he'll pop back through. And then Kingfisher goes into the pool. And then she's chilling by the pool. It's kind of dark down there. She hears this clicking sound. She gets a little freaked out because all she has with her is her dagger, but it's just the fox coming back. She decides that the fox is going to be hanging out with her. She needs to name it, so she decides to name it Onyx. And Ceres waits what she assumes is about an hour, but honestly, it's a little hard to keep track when you don't have like a clock or anything. Like, if you were in this situation and you had to keep track of like an hour without any clocks, what would you do? How could you do it? Would you count? Would you sing a song a certain number of times? You're like, okay, I know the song is about 3 minutes long. I can sing it 20 times. That seems easier than counting to like 3,600, which is what you would need to count to. 3,600, yeah. Ugh. Anyway, she does it. She opens the pool. She's barely reopened this pool of Quicksilver when the surface turns liquid again and Kingfisher burst through it. Kingfisher isn't alone, though. He is hauling a limp body with him. And Kingfisher says, quickly, the pendant. And Ceres, takes the pendant and loops it back around Kingfisher's neck. And Kingfisher is, collapsed on the ground, kind of, writhing around on the ground. But he reminds her to close the gate. She gets it closed, and then she goes over to look at the limp body and is very disappointed not to find her brother, but instead to find Carrion Swift. And she's like, what the hell, Kingfisher? That is not who I wanted. And Kingfisher says, I don't know. I tracked your bloodline. It led me straight to him. He said he was Hayden. And Ceres says, did you have your sword pointed at him? And Kingfisher says, no, I had him in a headlock. And Ceres is like, no wonder he lied to you about who he was. He probably thought you were a debt collector of one of Madra's men. And Kingfisher explained that it had been so difficult to retrieve him because the pool in Zavarin is located inside the palace. So the moment he had emerged, he'd been surrounded by guards. He had to get through that, get out to the 3rd district, go find her brother, and then get back to the palace in under an hour. So he's like, will this guy work? Will this guy be sufficient? And Ceres is like, no, obviously not. The deal is off. And Kingfisher is like, no, it's not. Our deal was that I would try to go get Hayden. I did try. So we're getting out of here. And Ceres is like, I'm not going back to my rooms. And Kingfisher says, we're not going back to your rooms at all. First, I'm finding you a healer, and then I'm going to go find Ren, and then we're going to get the hell out of here. Kingfisher then leads him up a bunch of stairs and back up to the main part of the palace. He drops her off in an alcove and he says, stay here, wait for me, and do not make a sound. Another hour passes before Kingfisher returns. He doesn't have Ren with him, which is one of the main things he was going to get, but Kingfisher explains that he couldn't track him down, and so he just left a note. He picks up Carrion, and then they head back down the stairs and out into the courtyard in front of the palace. He then takes her out to the stables. Ceres isn't excited because she's not a big fan of horses. According to her, they do not get along, but Kingfisher shockingly doesn't care. He tells her to stay in the saddle and keep her mouth shut. And Kingfisher explains that because she agreed to the oath, that means she's bound to Kingfisher and has to do what he tells her to do because that was part of the oath. She has to listen to him. And Ceres is like, well, that's not what I meant when I made the oath to you. And Kingfisher says, too bad. I taught you a valuable lesson that will serve you well for the rest of your very short human life in this realm. Always pay attention to the fine print, the devils, and the details. Now let's go. They head out into the snow, and Ceres sees stars for the first time. Also, she's so overwhelmed by, the snow everywhere, which is just water. Just the abundance of water here is, so overwhelming to a girl who got 6 ounces every day. And she thinks to herself, my home was up there amongst the stars. And I'm, shocked by the implication that her home is on another planet. But I guess if there's 2 suns, it can't be this planet. Kind of crazy. Okay. Ceres is trying to convince Kingfisher they can't leave yet. They have to wait for Ren, but Kingfisher assures her that Ren will catch up with them. And then he helps her up onto the horse. He says, I got you a nice one. You don't have to do anything. Just sit up there and the horse will follow me. It'll be okay. And Ceres is like, where's my bag? I need my bag. Onyx is in there. And Kingfisher is like, what the heck is an onyx? And Ceres is like, he is my fox. And Kingfisher passes through the bag. And after she confirms that Onyx is safe and sound in there, they get started. Although Kingfisher is like, Onyx is a wild animal. He should run alongside the horses. He should not be riding them. And Ceres is like, he can't run, he'll get cold. And Kingfisher is like, he's a wild animal and this is his natural habitat. And Ceres says, why don't you focus on your own cargo instead of mine? Your passenger is going to cause all kinds of problems when he wakes up. And then Kingfisher says, at the risk of repeating myself for the 1,100th time, we should leave him here then. And Ceres says, we are not leaving him here. Belkin will kill him the moment he realizes that you've kidnapped me. And Kingfisher says, it's not kidnapping if you come willingly. And Ceres says, I'm not doing any of this willingly. I want to go home. And Kingfisher says, and yet you're coming to help me end a war, aren't you? What more of a noble cause could there be? Congratulations on achieving sainthood. The path is pretty treacherous, and they travel without going through these cities, and it's like fairly dark out. Carrion is flopping around on the back of Kingfisher's horse, and Ceres is thinking about like what would have possessed him to claim that he was Hayden in a scary situation in which someone had a sword to his throat. Like she's a little confused by that. They've been traveling for a while, and then Ceres hears screaming, and Kingfisher explains that they're passing through the forest of the Shades, and the Shades are reliving their last moments of their lives, and this place is a prison, so the Shades that are trapped here are all guilty of the most heinous of crimes. Kingfisher offers to gift her with temporary face sight so she can see the Shades and what they're doing, but she's like, no, I would like to sleep tonight, so no thank you. Ceres asks him then, how much longer do we have to do this? And Kingfisher says half an hour, but we could do it faster if we make the horses trot. Ceres is like, absolutely not. They're walking at a great pace. Then Kingfisher explains that he knew Ceres took the ring while they were making out, and he was just interested in seeing what she was planning to do. Mostly, he knew that she was up to something because she brought a bag packed full of supplies to the forge, which, like, doesn't make sense. Like, why did she bring a bag full of snacks? They arrive at this like rickety pub/inn, and Ceres is like, are we going to sleep here? And Kingfisher says, maybe. We'll see how long it takes Renfist to catch up. They get into the stables, and the stable master tries to buy Onyx off of Ceres, and Ceres is like, he's not for sale. And then Kingfisher explains that like it's her pet, and it's like very confusing. And then the stable master offers to buy Carrion, but Kingfisher is like, no, just have him sleep back here. Don't bother him. I'll be really cranky if I find out he's been harmed. They go into the pub, and it's filled with all sorts of strange creatures. Almost immediately, Ceres' head is swarmed by a group of tiny fairies. She tries to wave them away, but Kingfisher warns her that they are mean when they get drunk, and as she's like trying to, shoo them away from her, one of them does bite her. Kingfisher orders them both beers at the bar, and they find a spot in like the back corner at a table, and Kingfisher takes it upon himself to disinfect Ceres' arm from the fox bite and the fairy bite. He claims, by dumping like essentially like just like a shot of liquor straight on her arm, and he claims that her body wouldn't be able to fight off all of the random germs she would be encountering for the first time in this world. Obviously it like really stings, and Sarah's like, ow, what the heck? She says to him, you enjoy that? What kind of male likes hurting people? And Kingfisher says, I don't enjoy hurting people. I don't like it at all, but that doesn't mean it isn't necessary. To avoid far more serious pain, sometimes we have to endure a little sting. Sometimes some of us have to inflict it. You say it so mockingly, but I do care about your well-being. You're important. Without you, I can't end this war or protect my people, so I have to keep you safe so I can accomplish my goals. So yes, I'll hurt you if it means I'll keep you safe. I'll force you to follow me to the ends of this realm because that's the only way I can make sure you stay alive. Now drink your beer. Kingfisher explains that they are headed back to his home of Cahlish, which means they will not need to travel on horseback anymore. Unfortunately, Cahlish is a war zone. And Ceres is like, how am I supposed to stay safe in a war zone? And Kingfisher says, by staying really, really, really close to me. Ren arrives at the tavern about 2 hours later, and he explains almost immediately that Lane is like really upset that they had just like left without talking to her, and that like they had a plan to work together, and Kingfisher just ran off on his own. And Kingfisher explains, our little friend here forced my hand. She tried to commit suicide. I found her seconds before she was going to take a dip without a relic. And Ren says, I don't care. You took Belkin's alchemist and the sword too. And Kingfisher says, the last time he laid his hands on a sword of note, he used it to murder the true king. And the whole fucking Dianthius line, if Rurik Dianthius, okay, so I think what we've learned here is Rurik Dianthius was like the true king, and Belkin killed him, and so he's like kind of the false king. Renfist says, as you just pointed out, Rurik Dianthius is gone. There's no point in playing a game of if only where he's concerned. Belkin is the king, and like it or not, as king, he can claim whatever the hell he wants to claim. The god swords are all dead. They are all paperweights now. Belkin couldn't do any more damage with it than he could do with an ordinary sword. You should have just let him add it to his collection. What harm would it have done? And Kingfisher says, that sword is a holy relic. He isn't fit to wield it. I'll die before I let Belkin wear it on his hip. And Renfist says, so taking it had nothing to do with the fact that Solace was your father's blade. No, forget I even asked. I already know that is the truth of it. As for your sword, Nimmerel has been corrupted for years. Kingfisher slammed his hands against the table, the cowl of his hood falling down. Nimmerel is the only thing that stood between Yvalia and the everlasting darkness for the past 400 years. And then whispers start to spring up at the pub around them as like that outburst caused people to like really take a closer look at their table, and people are recognizing both Kingfisher and Ren. And Ren says, time to go. They get up, they're heading for the door when a Fey warrior steps in front of Kingfisher and drops to a knee. He says, "It's an honor to kneel at the feet of a dragon's bane. Please, a blessing, Commander. Only if you deem fit to, of course." And Kingfisher says, "I think you have me mistaken for someone else." The warrior goes on to say, "My cousin fought with you and your wolves at Ajun Sky. The way he described you, you are the Fisher King. You can't be anyone else." And Kingfisher says, "I might fit your cousin's description on the outside, but I am not the man he fought with at Ajun." And the warrior starts talking about the battle that Kingfisher had led to victory against all odds and how he had saved thousands of lives. And Kingfisher is like, "I remember." The warrior says, "A lifetime of thanks to both of you for what you did. There will never be enough Sarush." And the whole pub starts to echo the word Sarush, Sarush, Sarush. Seems like everyone in the room has a story about him or Ren and something that Kingfisher had done to save their town or their people or their family. Kingfisher seems deeply uncomfortable with this. And he says to all of them, that was a long time ago. That person doesn't exist anymore." And Sarah's kind of blown away by what she sees and how much good and how beloved Kingfisher seems to be in this random tavern. They head outside and there is this gateway made of smoke and shadow. And Kingfisher says, "Let's get this over with. You'll follow Ren and I'll be right behind you." And Sarah says, "I'm not going through that spooky shadow gate." And Kingfisher explains that she is, and either she can spend the next 2 months riding on a horse, or she can walk through it and be done in a couple seconds. And Sarah says, "Horseback sounds like a great idea, actually." And Kingfisher is like, "Actually, it's not optional. Your oath gives you no choice." And then Ren's like, "Wait a second. Oath? Please tell me you did not oath the human girl to you." And Kingfisher is like, "Don't worry, she got something in return. Now please go through the gate. We can discuss this on the other side." And Ren is trying to assure her. He's like, "It's not a big deal. You'll be disoriented for a second, but just keep walking. It'll be over before you know it." Saris is really anxious about it, but she does it. Unfortunately for her, it is kind of a big deal. It's very disorienting. She throws up everywhere the moment she's through. It collapses on the ground because she's so dizzy. Kingfisher immediately is walking off. He walks through it and walks down the hall, sparing no second glance at Saris. Ren helps Saris to her feet, though, and says, "Thankfully, you won't have to experience it again. For some reason, the gates only affect us the first time we go through them. For most of us, it's just a little dizziness, maybe a headache. For a human, it's a little more than that, it seems. No one's seen a human in a very long time. There's a lot we've forgotten. I'm sorry." And Saris is like, "You don't need to apologize. Not to me, not for him." And Ren confirms that he is Onyx. The little fox will be waiting for her when she wakes up, and then he picks her up and starts to carry her somewhere where she can rest. Ren explains, "Fisher used to be kinder, but the Quicksilver inside of him, it makes it difficult for him to think straight. It wears on him. It's exhausting for him, shutting out the voices. It's made him hard." And Sarah says, "You shouldn't make excuses for him." Ren says, "They aren't excuses. We were raised together. We're practically brothers. I know him better than I know myself. The first time Belkin forced him to travel without a relic, the silver infected him so badly that I thought we'd lost him altogether. His mind was so fractured. Let's just say it took him a long time to recover. The healers did their best, but the piece that remains in his eye torments him night and day. His mother's relic doesn't seem to be effective anymore and now he's been exposed to Quicksilver twice without it again. I don't know what to expect from him anymore." And then Saris asks where Kingfisher has been for the last 100 years, but Ren doesn't answer. Saris wakes up to Onyx growling at Carrion at the foot of her bed, and Carrion is like, look, shh, it's all right. She's awake. Stop overreacting. I didn't even murder her." And Saris is like, "If you touch that fox, I will skin you alive. What the hell were you playing at, telling Fisher that you were Hayden?" And Carrion says, "You should be thanking me. That psychotic monster looked like he was planning on murdering your brother. I did him a favor if it wasn't for me." And Saris is like, "Just shut up and tell me. Is he alive, Carrion? I need to know. I have to know." And Carrion is like, "Hayden? Yeah, he's alive. Why wouldn't he be?" And Saris goes, "Because Madra swore she was going to find him and kill him. She said she was going to destroy the whole ward." And Carrion says, "I told you that Gauntlet was trouble." And then he goes on to explain that Hayden is in the 7th. He says, "I got him papers and shifted him that first night when you were taken up to the palace. He's now gainfully employed as a store clerk. It isn't glamorous work, but it's better than having no job at all. He has triple water rations in a room above the shop. I haven't visited for a couple days, and I didn't want to draw too much attention to him being a new face and all. But he's comfortable. I can't say that he's happy. He's brainstorming all sorts of ways to get you out of the palace." Essentially, we learn the vibe back in Zolvarin is that everyone is getting ready for Everlight. Nothing really has changed except that Elroy really wants to know where Saris is, and so does Hayden. They're both quite concerned with her, but they really haven't changed anything about patrols or anything. And then Carrion says to her, "I think it's my turn to have a few things explained to me. Principally, where are we? Why are we here? Who were the people who came in here about half an hour ago and laid their hands all over you? Were they really Fae, or did I hallucinate that part?" And apparently some healers had come and patched her up that morning. Ceres is like relaxing a little bit now that she knows her brother is safe, and she looks around her bedroom. It's super cute and cozy. Ceres explains kind of everything that happened to her since she got taken to the palace and went through that Quicksilver pool. Carrion really fixates, though, on the idea of Kingfisher kissing Ceres and calls Kingfisher Ceres' new boyfriend. Just then, Kingfisher strolls into the room, and he says, "Just so we're clear, I'm only half insane, and your friend is bound to me. Did she tell you that she's the only reason you're still alive yet? I wanted to leave you at the Winter Palace." And Carrion goes, "And to think you weren't infatuated with me anymore. I have to say, I would have preferred to stay in Sylvarin, though. I was about to close a spectacular deal that would have made me a very rich man." And Kingfisher says, "I need you to come with me. I've got a bunch of things to do, and I'm not going to drag you, but I'd appreciate you coming with me." She says, "Make me a promise. Swear that you will allow me and Carrion to return to Sylvarin the moment I have made enough relics for your people." And Kingfisher says, "As you wish," and he binds himself to her with that promise. They leave the bedroom, they start walking around, and Ceres is kind of surprised by how lovely Cahlish is, that, or at least the part of town she can see out her window is. She can see people kind of strolling around. The house itself is really cozy, it's quite lovely. As they're walking around, they surprise Archer, who is this little guy who looks like he's made out of the last embers of a fire. He looks like a little lava monster. He's only 3 feet tall, and his big descriptor is that he has a large belly. Obsessed with him. Archer is so surprised to see Fisher here that he starts sobbing as he hugs Kingfisher. And he's like, "I missed you so, so, so much. I wished and hoped every single day." And Kingfisher says, "I missed you too, my friend." He burns Kingfisher's shirt while he's hugging him, but Kingfisher quickly mends it, brushing aside Archer's apology. And then Kingfisher sends Archer away with promises to catch up before dinner. And Kingfisher explains to Ceres that Archer is a fire sprite. And in this house, we love fire sprites. Fire sprites are very important to us. In this house. My house. Not Kingfisher's house. Although I think he loves a fire sprite too. They're not fae, they're fire sprites. He explains that there's a difference, and you can't go around calling everything a fae. People will get offended. And Ceres explains that she doesn't plan to stay here long enough to need to learn the differences between the different types of creatures. Kingfisher says, "So eager to get back to that awful city, back to all that oppression and starvation. I can't really see the appeal." And Sarah says, "Out of everyone, you should understand why I need to go back the most. You are desperate to do everything you can to help your friends. I have friends and family who need my help too. They're too tired to fight Madra on their own. They've given up. If I don't go home, who will help them?" Kingfisher says, "I haven't found myself in this position voluntarily. I wouldn't have chosen to be here if I didn't have to. The task is my birthright. It became mine the moment I drew my first breath. You are just one of hundreds of thousands of people who lived in your city. Why should you bear the responsibility of trying to save them when they refuse to save themselves?" They head to the forge, and this forge here is very different than the forge she was using back in the Winter Palace. It is extremely well equipped, and on one side it has a big giant window, and it's open to this gorgeous view of the mountain range. The room itself is magicked to be bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And she points this out, and this opens a conversation about what magic can do. And Kingfisher explains that different fairies will have different specialties on or different fae have different specialties on what they can specifically do. And he explains that for example, the Shadow Gate, they couldn't just appear that in the palace, because also fae can sense large uses of magic, and if they would have done that in the palace, there's no way they would have been able to get through it without Belkin feeling it and just immediately going there. And so they had to travel a good distance away so the king wouldn't sense the Shadow Gate when they opened it. He also explains the difference between the Shadow Gates and the Quicksilver pools, and that the Shadow Gates can only be used to travel within a realm, so across land, where the Quicksilver pools travel you between realms. Then Kingfisher opens up this big trunk that is just full of silver rings of all different shapes and sizes, some with gems, some with family crests, 800 of them according to Kingfisher, and there are more and more trunks with rings. I think there are 20 of them. Kingfisher explains that she needs to turn all of those rings, 15,000 of them, into relics. And he goes on to say they don't need to be pretty, just something simple and wearable, just like this pendant. And Sarah realizes that her mistake in promising to make him as many relics as he needed. Kingfisher says, "I have 15,000 warriors. To have enough relics for my people, I need 15,000. When you are done with all these rings, I'll release you from your oath and take you to the closest Quicksilver pool so you can leave. Until then..." And Sarah says, I don't even know how to turn the rings into relics. That alone could take weeks. It could take months. And Kingfisher says, "Well, you better get to work then." He leaves Ceres in there with a stack of a few books. Most of, or like a bunch of them are like old and falling apart. A bunch of them are written in like a Fae language she doesn't understand, so a lot of it is useless to her, but she looks through the ones that she can. Food is delivered to her midday, and it's delish. She spends about another hour on the books after food is delivered before she just is like, screw it. I need to start just like experimenting. And she starts by holding the rings and trying to tune into the vibrations. She spent her life trying to kind of ignore these vibrations that metals put off, but now she's like really trying to tune into it. And she is able to kind of locate the vibration that is specific to Yevelian silver, which is what she needs. Then she separates out the Yevelian silver by like listening to anything for that same frequency. And she melts down enough to make like a little pendant. And she just starts chucking random stuff into it. Most of it burns off, but then the salt seems to do well, so she like uses that as like her first test. In order to test the relic, she needs some Quicksilver, but Kingfisher didn't leave any for her. But then she hears it whispering, here, I am here. She finds it like tucked in the back corner. It's only a couple tablespoons, and it's solid. She's able to turn it back into its liquid form, and she drops the medallion in, and the Quicksilver like keeps whispering. It hasn't changed anything at all. So she continues to experiment, adding random crap to the melted silver. By the end of the day, she still hasn't figured out anything that will work. She heads back inside, and she finds both Onyx and Ren in the hallway. And Ren says, I've heard you've been assigned quite a task. And Sarah says, I've only made 4 attempts, but I'm already exhausted. And Ren explains that he was just out fighting on the pass. There was just a couple skirmishes today, but like they are on the war, like the war front now. And then he explains that he yelled at Kingfisher about the oath he made her swear, and he like is like, I made Kingfisher promise to get to know you better. And Sarah says like, why would you do that? I don't want to spend more time with him. And Ren says, I am worried that he views you as a tool he'll use to his breaking point. He needs to see you as a person, and he'll only do that if he learns more about you. I have told him to have dinner with you tonight, and he agreed, I think. And Sarah isn't excited about it, but agrees to go to dinner with him, but only because Ren promises there'll be alcohol there. They go to the dining room. It is an absolutely massive room, and Saris is seated like way up the opposite end of the table from Kingfisher. Saris had gone back to her room and cleaned up and changed. Carrion wasn't there when she got back, and there had been a dress waiting for her in her bed, but instead she found some pants and a shirt in a drawer and changed into those instead, not eager to put on another dress. Saris says to Kingfisher, I don't suppose I could get something poured into this, gesturing at her wine glass. And Kingfisher says, tell me how you fared today, and I'll consider it. And he does this in a way where he's like magicked his voice, so it feels like he is whispering like directly into her ear, even though he's sitting like across the room from her. Syrinx explains that she tried a few things, but all of them failed, and if she wants to use that silver again, she'll have to refine it, and she'll need a whole day to do it, which means she won't be able to experiment that day. And Kingfisher is like, okay, it sounds like that's what you're gonna have to do. And Syrinx is like annoyed because she's like, if this is so urgent, why are you letting me waste all this time? Like, why are you making more obstacles for me? And Kingfisher says, I'm not refusing you more silver to toy with you. Resources are tight at Cahlish. The regular silver can't be spared. And Sarah says, what are you talking about? This place is covered in gold. And Kingfisher says, if we needed gold for your trials, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Silver is like a hotly guarded resource. And then Sarah says, like, okay, well, Ren promised me there'd be wine at dinner tonight, at the very least. And Kingfisher says, Renfish should know better than to make promises on my behalf. But if you're so desperate for a drink, feel free to come pour yourself some. Gesturing at like the wine that he has at his end of the table. And Saris not only gets up to get the wine, but decides she doesn't want to sit halfway across the room from Kingfisher. And so she brings her plate with him and winds up sitting like right down next to him. Kingfisher goes on to explain kind of the deal with the silver. He explains there's no more silver in the realm. Belkin has an embargo on it, and when Saris suggests that maybe Belkin would be willing to share if he knew that they needed it to do this like relic work, Kingfisher lets her know that Belkin doesn't give a heck about the war. Food is served by the fire sprites, and they kind of like freak out about the fact that Kingfisher is just like alone in here with a human girl, and Kingfisher is like, just leave the place and go. He's like not willing to deal with the fire sprites' antics right now. Saris is like, well, I'll eat in the forge tomorrow. Like, I do not want to be causing this much hubbub. And he's like, no, you'll eat here. I don't want you to poison yourself. And Saris is like, you should send Carrion home. Even if you refuse to let me go, his grandmother will be worried about him, and he could tell Hayden and Elroy I'm okay if you send him back. And Kingfisher kind of implies that there's sort of some romance happening between Carrion and Saris, which Saris adamantly denies. And then Saris starts to complain about the fact that Kingfisher really didn't hold up his end of the oath and brought Carrion back instead of her brother. But Kingfisher is like, you know what? I did try. Kingfisher explains that Carrion was covered in the scent of Saris's arousal. So that's why he had gotten confused, because he had been covered in when they were like making out, he'd gone covered in her scent, and then that scent was also on Carrion, and so he got it twisted up. And Sarah says, like, I slept with him months ago. Months. It was once, and I was drunk, and he's never let me live it down since. There's no way you can still smell him on me. Smell me on him. And Fisher says, there's every way. I'd know the smell of you anywhere. On anyone. I'd know it blind, in the dark, across the sea. I'd be able to scent you. Which is, like, almost romantic if it wasn't about smelling. If it was not about smelling, this would be a romantic line. Unfortunately, before they can finish this romantic discussion about how he can smell her stink anywhere, the dining room wall literally blows open. And Sarah says Kingfisher became death. 4 spooky guys burst in with red eyes and fangs and tattered clothes. They crash through the window and start roaring at Kingfisher. Kingfisher starts like slicing him up and yells at Saris to like move out of the way. But 2 of the creatures come towards her, a woman and like a teen boy. They move in this like weird jerky and animalistic sort of fashion. And they have these big claws. Saris is able to like cut the old woman, and blood and like maggots spurt out of her, which is horrifying. But the boy is able to like grab her and slam her to the ground, and she feels their claws like raking over her. She's pretty sure she's gonna die, but luckily at that moment Kingfisher comes over, throws the creatures off of her. She kills them both, and then he says to her, you've been clawed, the wound needs scourging. And Saris goes, scourging? And Kingfisher says, the poison will kill you otherwise. Did either of them bite you? And Saris says no. But then she's getting very nauseous. She starts seeing stars. She can't feel her fingers, and she's like, what were those things? And Kingfisher says, Sansarothian foot soldiers, feeders. They are the reasons we need silver so badly. It's the only thing that can kill them. Now, can somebody please help me? And then Saris is dreaming. She dreams of death and liquid fire. She's trapped in this nightmare where these the creepy feeder things are surrounding her, biting and clawing at her. They're like chasing her, and she's racing after her on all fours, and she's trying to outrun them, but there's just like too many and to outrun them, and she just like keeps falling to the ground. Then she awakes fully. She's in this new bedroom. It's gorgeous. There are these like big stained glass windows. She's in this 4-poster bed where the bed holes are like carved with all these like creatures. And she sees Kingfisher sprawled in a chair in the corner of the room. Kingfisher says to her, she lives. And Sarah's like, that was not my fault. And Kingfisher is like, I literally never said it was. And Sarah says, like, you're looking at me like it was. And Kingfisher explains that she had already been healed because they have good healers. Because it's like an active war zone, so they need healers as well as soldiers. And then Kingfisher promises her that it won't happen again. He hadn't anticipated how hungry the feeders would have gotten, but now they have people patrolling the grounds to make sure that, no one bursts through the dining room again. And he compliments the fact that she was able to get a hit on one of them. And Sarah, I say her name a little different every time. Kind of fun. Saris is offended that he thinks a little of her, but he explains, you nearly died from a scratch that would have been a mild irritation to me. You are soft, you are fragile, you are vulnerable. You are a newborn fawn stumbling around in the dark, surrounded by predators with very sharp teeth. I'm the thing that exists on the other side of the dark. I am the thing that puts the fear of God into those monsters who would eat you, bones and all. Okay, have you been workshopping that one for a little while? Clearly, he was writing that in his journal. He's like, when she asked me about her being a human, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it's going to be good. Bones and all. Do you think he saw that Timothée Chalamet movie about cannibals? I bet he did. I bet he loved it. And then Saris realizes that she must be in his bedroom. And she's like, hey, why are all the paintings in your room all ripped up? And Kingfisher says, because I destroyed them. Sometimes the pendant can't stave off the darkness that creeps in. He starts to leave the room. And Sarah says, really? That's it? You're leaving? If that's the case, I'm going to go back to my own room now. And Kingfisher says, no, you're not. The poison is still in your system. You need to rest until you are fully healed. And Sarah says, then where are you going to sleep if I'm in your bed? And Kingfisher says, I'm headed to Erin, which is a war camp for the week, so he won't be around. Saris tries to get out of bed the moment Kingfisher leaves the room, but Kingfisher used her oath to him to make sure she didn't leave the bed. So she's stuck there until she's all healed up. Sarah spends the next 5 days in bed. She's so bored, but Onyx keeps her company. The fire sprites bring her meals, and healers come and check on her. Kingfisher is gone the whole time. On the final day, Carrion brings her breakfast. Carrion is like, you know what would really piss off Kingfisher? If we hooked up in his bed. And Saris is like, oh yeah, sure. Sounds like a great idea, you idiot. What do you think he'd do if he hooked up in his bed with someone? And Carrion is like, well, I'd be willing to risk inciting his wrath, whatever his punishment would be. I think it'd be worth it. And Saris is like, no. And Carrion is like, a no in general, or just a no in this bed? And Sarah's like, what do you think? And Carrion says, you could eviscerate a man with that expression. It's one of the things I love most about you. And Sarah says, I don't love anything about you. Carrion explains that he's been training with the new guards, and he's also got some new boots, which Kingfisher gave him in exchange for Carrion taking a bath. Kingfisher was very insistent that Carrion bathe as soon as they got here because he didn't like the way he smelled, which we know is probably because he smelled like our girl, Saris. And he explains that some water sprites gave him a bath, paying particular attention to his nether regions. Yeah. And then Carrion lets her know that she's allowed to leave the bed as soon as she finishes her breakfast. Woo! She heads back to the forge that afternoon to continue her work on her relic experiments. She's only got enough time to do 3 experiments per day because she spends the rest of the day refining the silver so it's ready for the next day. She spends the next 8 days, so 24 attempts, that are all failures, working in the forge. And then the next day she can hear Onyx yowling outside, which is like kind of typical. Onyx like runs around and does whatever. She doesn't notice, so she doesn't look up to notice the intruder climbing over the wall until it's too late. But it's actually just Ren. Ren has got some blood in his pants, and Saris is like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And Ren is like, sorry, I just didn't have a chance to clean up. I mostly just came to let you know that Fisher wants to have dinner with you tonight. So Fisher is back from war camp. And Saris is like, requested my presence or demanded my presence for dinner. And Ren is like, he doesn't mean to be so brusque. He's been fighting this war for so long now that he's forgotten what it is like to interact with polite society. And Saris is like, stop making excuses for him. He's just a bastard. And Ren says, he's also my best friend. The real him is in there somewhere, I promise. And Saris is like, are you going to come to dinner too? And Ren is like, I am not invited tonight. And Saris is like, I'm inviting you. And she wears him down, and eventually he agrees to come to dinner as well. Before Ren leaves her in the forge, Saris is like, is Kingfisher's sword Nimmerel magic? And Ren says, yeah, we don't know how. The sword gods went silent and abandoned the rest of the Fae, but Nimmerel has stayed. Even though the blade has blackened, the magic has remained inside of it. That night, they're headed to dinner. Saris decides that she's going to drag Carrion to dinner with her as well. He didn't want to come because he was in the middle of a sparring session. He has been training with the Avelian Fae guards. And he is also annoyed that Saris didn't get dressed in the little outfit that was laid out for her because he's like, your boobs would have looked fantastic in it. It would have been great for everyone. They arrive at the dinner table. And Kingfisher is like, you're late. Please enlighten me why you have invited half the household to a meeting that was just supposed to be for the 2 of us. And Saris is like, I thought this was dinner, and it would be fair. And how would it be fair for me to enjoy the pleasure of your company while these 2 missed out? Once again, Saris has been seated at the other end of the table, although the table is much smaller this time, but Saris drags her spot somewhere much closer to Kingfisher. Ren is surprised that Saris has chosen to sit so close to him, and Carrion even offers to switch seats with her. But Kingfisher, at the moment Carrion offers, says, try it and die. And Ren says, I'll switch with you. And Saris is like, what is the difference between this side of the table and that side? Either way, I still have to look at his smug face. And Kingfisher is like, she's right. She's made her decision. Let her sit wherever she wants to sit. And Ren is like, really? Then they chat to Carrion about him training with the guard and how he is just so impressed by the way that they're able to move and fight. And Saris asks to train as well. And Kingfisher is like, I'm surprised. I thought you were in a rush to get home. And Saris is like, well, I am. Kingfisher says, but you'd rather waste time out in the snow with the sword in your hand rather than working on the task that will set you free? And Sarah says, I'm getting nowhere with the relics. The way you have me working right now is pointless. I could run these trials until the end of time and I still won't figure out the transmutation process. And I have to say, you don't seem to give a shit. It's almost as if you don't really care if I have to stay here forever. As she's saying this, the fire sprites bring in dinner. And then Sarah starts asking Fisher about what he was up to at the camps, since he was only supposed to be there for 1 week, but ended up being gone for a little over 2, I think. He doesn't really answer her. And Ren asks a question, how long are you staying before you head back to camp? And Kingfisher says maybe a week. And then they're back to talking about training, and Kingfisher gives instructions to give Saris a training sword with a very dull blade. And Saris is like, I don't need a training sword. And Kingfisher says, you have experience wielding a real sword then? And they bicker back and forth about whether she's trained enough to wield a real sword, even though she's trained with a dagger. She hasn't trained with a sword, and so it'd be dangerous, blah, 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 blah. And Ren says, you know what? I'll be happy to demonstrate the differences between close quarter fighting with a dagger and swordplay in the morning. Saris, in the meantime, I plan on enjoying my dinner. Carrion, what kind of fighting system do the Guardians employ in the Silver City? He's like, stop fighting. Let's talk about literally anything else. And Saris is just kind of hasn't eaten anything. And then Kingfisher uses his magic again to do that whisper voice in her ear to say, eat. And Saris is like, stop. It makes me so uncomfortable when you do that. The whispering in my ear with your magic. And they talk about the fact that he's compelling her using their oath, but Kingfisher swears that he only uses it when it's for her own good. And Kingfisher is like, if I were evil, I'd make you get on your knees for me, and I'd make you keep going until you passed out from exhaustion. Okay, like, sure, I think we can all agree collectively, we're really glad you're not doing that, but I think there is a lot of things in between that, the bare minimum, and being like a nice person. And I do think you could be forcing her to do like a lot of things between like for her own good and getting on her knees for you. There might be some gray space. Hi, I'm back for the last little tiny bit. We have like just like a few minutes left in this video, I'm sure. But my camera battery died, and now it's nighttime because night comes early these days, and so we are just recording on my MacBook camera. I apologize for the downgrade in quality. Kingfisher is just like starting to like go off about the fact that Sarah's like clearly wants him, and so like maybe he'd be doing her a favor by like doing this. It's just super gross. Like, I called HR earlier. have I already called the police? If I haven't, I'm calling them. I'm calling Detective Olivia Benson. This is a special victims unit crime. Like, no. And Sarah's internally is like, I mean, like, I do find Fisher attractive, and she like has this like internal hatred for it because obviously she doesn't want to be forced to be with him. She's even if you find someone attractive, you probably would like some choice in the matter. So the thought of being like compelled to have to like serve him in these like physical ways is kind of yucky to her. Shockingly. Ren, meanwhile, is just trying to like eat his dinner and like not get into all of this. And then Kingfisher says to her, eat your dinner, Osha. You're going to need your strength. We won't be staying here for a week after all. We're returning to the war camp in the morning, and this time you're coming with us. I don't know what changed in the last 5 minutes of their conversation that has compelled Kingfisher to be like, you have to come with us to the war camp, but headed to the war camp she will. That's all we're going to talk about for this video. Obviously, we are not quite through all the way through Quicksilver. There's too much that happens for it to be one single video. I will work as hard as I can to get the next video out as soon as possible because I know Brimstone is right on the horizon. It comes out on Tuesday, and I want us to be ready to tackle that book as soon as we can. If this is your first video with me, I make these kind of recap videos all the time. I have done a bunch of series in the past, probably my favorite of which has been the Throne of Glass series, which is my favorite series of all time. I've recapped that entire series. I'm currently working through ACOTAR, and I've done a bunch of others in the past, as well as some ongoing ones. So I would love to see you in some of those videos or some of my other book content. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you very, very soon with the next Quicksilver video. Bye.